This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I never really believed in ghosts until I had no choice. Growing up in Raven Hollow's historic district, our house always had something in it. But the weirdest part, whatever it was, seemed completely obsessed with my brother while totally ignoring me. I was 12 when it started. My brother Mark was 14, and out of nowhere, his room became a hotspot for the strangest crap. Doors would slam shut when he was alone in his downstairs bedroom. The lights in his room flickered constantly, even after my dad replaced all the wiring. But the worst was the voices. He'd hear his name whispered at night, right next to his ear. Sometimes he'd hear full conversations that sounded like they were coming from the hallway, but when he'd check, nobody was there. My parents thought he was making it up at first. I did too, honestly. But I remember this one night when we were all watching TV in the living room. Mark got up to go to the bathroom, and the exact moment, he walked down the hall, every single light in the house flickered. Not just a little flicker either. They went completely out for maybe 2 seconds, then came back on. My dad checked the breaker box, called the power company, but there were no outages reported. The really bizarre thing was that it never bothered me, not once. We lived in the same house, ate the same food, had the same parents, but whatever this thing was, it only wanted Mark. My room was just upstairs from his, but I never experienced anything weird. No cold spots, no voices, nothing moving on its own. When Mark turned 18, he moved out immediately, said he couldn't take it anymore. I was 16 by then, and since his room was bigger than mine, I decided to move into it. My parents were worried, but I figured if this thing had ignored me for years, why would that change? The first night in his old room was unsettling. Not because anything happened, but because I was expecting something to happen. I kept staring at the closet door, waiting for it to creak open. I kept my phone's flashlight on all night because I was terrified the lights would go out, but nothing happened. After about a week, I started having these weird dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but dreams where I'd be sitting in the room and there would be someone standing in the corner just watching me. I could never see their face. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone had called my name, but it was always so faint I couldn't be sure. But that was it. No slamming doors, no flickering lights, nothing like what Mark had experienced. When I turned 18, I moved out to go to college. On the day I was packing up my stuff, the weirdest thing happened. There was this mirror on the wall that had been there since I was 5. It was securely mounted. My dad was paranoid about hanging things properly after a picture frame fell and nearly hit me when I was little. That mirror had been there for 13 years without budging an inch, but as I was packing the last of my clothes, there was this loud crash. The mirror had somehow fallen off the wall and shattered all over the floor. There were no nails on the ground, no hooks, nothing to explain how it fell. The mounting hardware was still firmly attached to the wall. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just weird timing, I thought. About 6 months after I moved out, Mark had to move back home. He'd lost his job and couldn't afford his apartment anymore. He was reluctant, but he didn't have many options. That's when things got really intense. The activity that had been dormant while I lived in that room came back with a vengeance. It wasn't just doors slamming anymore. Objects would move across tables. Mark's clothes would be thrown out of his dresser in the middle of the night. He'd wake up with scratches on his arms that he couldn't explain. My dad had always been the ultimate skeptic. He'd roll his eyes whenever Mark or I talked about the weird stuff happening in the house. But there was one incident that changed everything, even for him. One morning, we all woke up to the smell of burning plastic. We rushed downstairs to find the George Foreman grill turned on, with a plastic-wrapped loaf of bread sitting on top of it. The plastic was melting, and the bread was starting to char. It was a serious fire hazard. The thing is, my mom is absolutely obsessive about unplugging appliances and checking everything before bed. She double checks the stove, the toaster, everything. There's no way she would have left the grill plugged in, let alone turned on with plastic on it. When my dad saw that, the color drained from his face. He didn't say anything about ghosts or spirits, but he stopped dismissing our stories after that. A few weeks later, Mark and his girlfriend were home alone while my parents were on a weekend trip. They were in the living room watching a movie when they heard doors opening and closing upstairs. At first, they thought maybe my parents had come home early, but when they called out, there was no response. They had Mark's dog with them, a German Shepherd mix named Diesel. Diesel started growling at the bottom of the stairs, hackles raised, staring up into the darkness. What happened next still gives me chills when I think about it. As Diesel was growling, they heard something growl back. Not an echo, not the house settling, but a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from the top of the stairs. Mark's girlfriend refused to stay in the house after that. They packed an overnight bag and stayed at a motel until my parents came back. The weird thing was that the activity seemed to completely stop when Mark wasn't in the house. My parents said things were perfectly normal when he was at work or staying at his girlfriend's place, but the moment he walked through the door, it would start up again. Lights flickering, doors opening and closing, the TV turning on and off. I was living in California by this point, about 2,000 miles away from my family. I thought I'd left all that weirdness behind, but I was wrong. At first, it was small things that were easy to dismiss. The dryer door would slam shut when no one was near it. I'd put something down and find it in a completely different place later, but then it escalated. One day, I was home alone folding laundry when our vacuum cleaner, which had been sitting in the corner of the living room, suddenly shot across the room like someone had kicked it with incredible force. It slammed into the wall hard enough to crack the plastic housing. Another time I came home to find a light fixture in our hallway had been pulled about 3 inches out of the ceiling. The screws were still in place, but somehow the entire fixture had been wrenched downward, leaving a gap between it and the ceiling. My husband tried to say it was just poor installation, but the force needed to pull it down like that would have been significant. I started to wonder if whatever had followed my brother all those years was now following me too. I bought a spirit box, one of those devices that rapidly scans radio frequencies that spirits can supposedly manipulate to communicate. Most of the time it was just static and fragments of radio broadcasts. But one night, something came through clearly. I asked if there was anyone there who wanted to communicate. Through the static, a voice said, "I like Emily," my name. I asked why it had followed me to California, and the response was garbled, but it sounded like "always with you." Then I asked about a necklace that had belonged to my aunt, who passed away a year earlier. It was a silver pendant with a small diamond that went missing after she died. No one in the family knew where it was. Through the spirit box, a voice said, "Check green box." My aunt had kept her jewelry in a small green wooden box that we hadn't been able to find after she died. The next day, I called my mom and told her about it. She went looking and found the box tucked away in the back of my aunt's closet behind some old photo albums. The necklace was inside. The most disturbing incident happened about 3 months ago. My daughter and I were home alone, and I felt like we were being watched. I'd recently bought a thermal imaging camera attachment for my phone, partly for fun, partly because of all the weird stuff happening. I started scanning the living room with it, and that's when I saw it. The thermal image showed a human-shaped heat signature standing right next to us. It was about 6 feet tall and appeared to be looking down at my daughter. I took a screenshot before the shape disappeared, and when I looked at it later, I could clearly make out what looked like a head, shoulders, and torso. That night, I used the spirit box again. I asked what it wanted from us. The response chilled me. "Your husband, feeding off him." When I asked what that meant, there was no response, just static. Since then, my husband has been having health issues. Nothing life-threatening, but he's constantly exhausted, has frequent headaches, and has lost weight without trying. The doctors can't find anything physically wrong with him. I called Mark to tell him what was happening, and he wasn't surprised. He's convinced that whatever this thing is, it's attached to our family, not to the house in Ravenhollow. He believes it's some kind of demonic entity that's been with our family for generations, targeting certain members more than others. The thing that confuses me is why it seems to hate Mark, but is relatively benign toward me. It's never hurt me physically. It's never even really scared me that badly. It's almost like it's protective, but then why would it say it's feeding off my husband? Last week, I woke up at 3 a.m. to find my bedroom door wide open. I always close it before bed because our cat likes to jump on my face while I'm sleeping. As I got up to close it, I heard what sounded like footsteps going down the hallway toward my daughter's room. I ran after them, but there was nothing there. My daughter was sound asleep, but her nightlight had been unplugged. I don't know what to do anymore. Moving doesn't help. We've proven that. Whatever this is, it's not tied to a location. It's tied to us. Sometimes I think about trying to communicate more directly with it, to find out what it wants, but Mark thinks that would just make it stronger. The thing that scares me most isn't what it's done, but what it might do. So far it seems content with scaring us, moving things around, making its presence known. But what if that changes? What if it gets bored with these parlor tricks? What if it decides it wants more than just to feed off my husband's energy? I'm writing this all down partly to see if anyone else has experienced something similar, and partly because I'm terrified of what might happen next. I just want to understand why it's here and what it wants from my family. Story 2. I never believed in ghosts until I moved into the family home in Willow Creek. The house has been in my family for around 80 years now, and I'm the 4th generation to live here. It's not a mansion or anything special, just a weatherboard house with a big backyard near the river, built sometime in the 1930s. But there's something different about this place that I can't explain, even after living here for most of my life. Everyone who's ever stayed here for more than a few days has experienced something weird. My parents were pretty open about it when I was growing up. They'd just say, "Oh, that's just the house being the house," whenever something strange happened. We're not hardcore spiritualists or anything, but my mom would burn sage and incense whenever the vibes got bad, as she put it. It sounds silly, but it actually seemed to help. I remember asking my dad once if he was scared of the ghosts. He just shrugged and said, "They were here first, mate. We're the ones crashing their party." That's kind of how our family has always approached it. Like having roommates you never actually see. Well, mostly never see. I've had dozens of experiences over the years, ranging from absolutely terrifying to weirdly comforting. The worst one happened about 3 years ago. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone, just about to fall asleep. My foot was hanging slightly off the edge of the bed. Not much, just my toes really. My dog Bella, who usually sleeps in my room, had refused to come in that night. She just sat at the doorway whining, which should have been my first clue. Something was off. I was almost asleep when I felt something grab my ankle. Not like a gentle touch. It grabbed me, with fingers wrapping all the way around. Before I could even process what was happening, whatever had hold of me yanked with incredible force. I was pulled completely off the bed in one violent motion. My bed, a heavy queen-sized wooden frame, slid about half a meter across the floor. I scrambled to my feet and hit the light switch, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. There was nothing there, nothing. Just my empty room with the bed now sitting at an angle. I slept on the couch in the living room that night with all the lights on, and Bella curled up protectively on my chest. The backyard seems to be particularly active for some reason. My brother's ex was over for a barbecue a few years back, and she suddenly went pale while looking over my shoulder. When I asked what was wrong, she described seeing an elderly woman in Victorian-style dress standing by the big gum tree in our yard. The weird thing is, we all know exactly who she was talking about. My mom has seen her, my sister has seen her, my aunts and uncles have all seen her at different times. I've seen her too. I was hanging laundry on the clothesline one afternoon. Broad daylight, perfectly normal day. I felt that prickly sensation on the back of my neck like someone was watching me. When I turned around, There she was, about 10 meters away, just standing there in this old-fashioned high-neck dress. She wasn't threatening or anything, just observing. When I blinked, she was gone. It sounds mental, but I swear on everything I love that it happened. My bedroom seems to be a hotspot for activity. One winter night, and winter in Australia isn't exactly freezing where I live, maybe 10 degrees Celsius. I walked into my room and it was scorching hot, like stepping into a sauna. There was this heavy feeling in the air too, like the atmosphere was physically pressing down on me. It felt negative, angry almost. I was exhausted from work and just wanted to sleep, so I actually said out loud, "Yo, can you fuck off right now? It's not the time." I'm not even joking. Within seconds, the room cooled down to normal temperature and that oppressive feeling completely disappeared. Sometimes you just have to be direct with your ghosts, I guess. The shower is another place where weird stuff happens constantly. One night around 11 o'clock, I was taking a shower and clearly heard my mom laughing right outside the bathroom door. It was her distinctive laugh. I'd recognize it anywhere. The thing is, my mom goes to bed religiously at 8 every night and sleeps like the dead until morning. I called out, "Mom?" and there was dead silence. Then I heard footsteps walking away from the door, heading toward the back of the house. A second later, Bella went absolutely mental, racing from my parents' room, where she was sleeping with them, toward the backyard, barking her head off. Not her normal, "there's a possum in the tree" bark, but her serious guard dog bark that she only uses when she thinks there's an actual threat. My dad got up to check, but there was nothing out there. When my sister was little, she used to complain about toys flying off her shelves at night. We all thought she was just having nightmares until my mom actually witnessed a stuffed animal launch itself across the room one evening while tucking her in. That room used to be mine when I was younger, and the closet would open and close throughout the night. That same closet is ridiculously hard to open. Even as teenagers, we struggled with it because the sliding door is heavy and rusted on the tracks, yet somehow it would slide open smoothly in the middle of the night, then slam shut about an hour later. Not all the experiences have been scary though. After my great-grandfather's funeral when I was about 7, I was crying in my room, completely devastated. He and I had been really close. He taught me to fish and always snuck me lollies when my parents weren't looking. I was lying in bed sobbing when I felt someone sit on the edge of my bed. I looked up and saw two figures, an old man and an old woman. I recognized my great-grandfather immediately, even though he looked younger and healthier than when he'd died. The woman I didn't recognize at the time. They didn't speak, but I felt this overwhelming sense of comfort and love. The woman stroked my hair while my great-grandfather patted my shoulder. I wasn't scared at all. Somehow I knew they were there to make me feel better. Years later, I saw a photograph of my great-grandmother, who died before I was born, and immediately recognized her as the woman from that night. Some of the activity is just part of our daily lives now. We all hear footsteps in the hallway at night, even though everyone's accounted for in their rooms. Our old cat Mittens died 5 years ago, but we still occasionally hear her distinctive meow and the bell on her collar jingling in the kitchen, especially around her old feeding time. There's constant tapping on the second-story windows, even though there are no trees close enough to touch the house, random knocking on doors when no one's there, the TV turning on by itself to static in the middle of the night, my mom's hairbrush moving from the bathroom to her bedside table when she's home alone. My grandfather passed away 6 months ago, and since then the workshop under the house has taken on this weird feeling. He spent most of his time down there tinkering with engines and building things. Now when you go down there, you get this intense feeling of being watched, not in a threatening way, more like someone's keeping an eye on you. His tools keep getting rearranged, and occasionally we hear the sound of metalwork happening when no one's down there. My dad says it's just Grandpa making sure we don't mess with his stuff. Last month something happened that still gives me chills thinking about it. I was home alone working late on my laptop in the living room. It was around 2 in the morning and the house was completely silent except for the clicking of my keyboard. Suddenly, every single door in the house, bedroom doors, bathroom door, front door, back door, slammed shut simultaneously. The noise was deafening, like a bomb had gone off. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My first thought was that a massive gust of wind had somehow gotten into the house, but all the windows were closed, and it was a still night outside. I sat frozen, waiting for something else to happen. After about a minute of complete silence, every door in the house slowly creaked open again, one by one, starting from the front of the house and moving toward the back. I could see down the hallway as each door opened by itself, with no one there to push it. When the back door finally swung open, I heard what sounded like dozens of people whispering together, the sound floating in from the backyard. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded urgent, almost like an argument. I'm not ashamed to admit I was absolutely terrified. I grabbed my keys and phone and ran straight to my car. I spent the night at a friend's place and came back in the morning. Everything was completely normal when I returned. All doors closed as they should be. No sign of anything unusual. The strangest part? When I checked my security camera footage the next day, I installed cameras after the foot-grabbing incident. There was nothing on the recording. The video showed me sitting on the couch, then suddenly jumping up in panic and rushing out of the house. The doors never moved on camera, even though I watched them open with my own eyes. I've tried researching the history of the property, but there's nothing that would explain all this activity. No tragic deaths, no evidence of burial grounds or anything like that. Just a normal family home that happens to have some permanent residents we can't see. We've learned to live with it over the years. New friends and partners get warned before staying over. My sister's husband thought we were all crazy until he spent a weekend here and had his beard tugged by invisible fingers while he was brushing his teeth. Now he refuses to stay overnight. Most of the time it feels like the spirits, or whatever they are, just want to remind us they're still here. They're part of our family history in a weird way. Generations of Thompsons and generations of ghosts, all sharing the same space. Sometimes I wonder what will happen when I eventually move out. Will they miss me? Will they follow me? Or are they tied to this place forever, waiting for the next generation to move in and start the cycle all over again? I'm not sure I'll ever understand what's happening in this house. All I know is that I'm never alone here, even when I'm the only living person around. And honestly, most days I'm okay with that. Story 3. I still can't believe it's been over 15 years since we moved into that house in Oak Ridge. I was only 10 years old when Mom decided we needed a fresh start after the divorce. It was me, my little brother Thomas, who was 6 at the time, and my older sister Claire, who was 13. Mom thought the move would be good for all of us, a chance to leave the past behind and start over. Little did we know what was waiting for us in that house. The first few months were pretty normal, just the usual adjustment period of getting used to a new neighborhood, new school, and making new friends. The house itself was nice enough. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a decent backyard, nothing special, but nothing obviously wrong with it either. No one told us any creepy stories about previous owners or anything like that. It was just a house. But about 9 months after we moved in, Thomas came running into my room one afternoon. His face was pale, and he had tears streaming down his cheeks. I remember I was just sitting on my bed reading when he burst in. "Lily, Lily, there was a girl in your room," he shouted between sobs. I looked around, confused. "What are you talking about? I've been here the whole time." "No, not you, another girl. She was standing by the window looking outside. She had glasses and hair too here," he said, pointing to his shoulders. I checked my window and saw nothing. "There's nobody here, Thomas. You're just seeing things." He was adamant, though. "I'm not making it up. I saw her. She didn't say anything. She was just standing there." Mom came in because of all the commotion, and of course she told Thomas it was just his imagination. He had always been a sensitive kid with an active imagination, so we all just kind of brushed it off. I remember teasing him a little about his imaginary friend for the next few days until he got mad and stopped talking about it. But then other weird stuff started happening. About a month after Thomas's sighting, I was home alone after school while Mom was picking up my siblings. I was in the kitchen getting a snack when I distinctly heard footsteps upstairs. like someone walking across the floor above me. I froze with the refrigerator door open, listening. The steps went from what would have been my room, across the hallway, and into Claire's room. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I knew I was alone in the house. I quietly closed the fridge and backed up against the wall, not sure what to do. Then the footsteps started again, this time coming down the stairs. I was so terrified I couldn't move, but when I finally got the courage to peek around the corner into the hallway, there was nothing there. The footsteps had stopped. I told Mom when she got home, but she just said it was probably the house settling or the pipes. She didn't believe me any more than we had believed Thomas. Things got worse after Claire and I switched rooms. She was going through this phase where she wanted more privacy, and since my room was at the far end of the hallway, she thought it would be better for her. I didn't mind at first. Her room was bigger anyway, but that room, it always felt off. The air was always heavy in there, and it always seemed colder than the rest of the house. The scariest thing happened about 2 weeks after I moved into Claire's old room. I was trying to fall asleep one night. It must have been around 11 or so, when I heard a distinct knocking sound, 3 sharp knocks, like someone rapping their knuckles against glass. I opened my eyes and realized it was coming from the window right above my bed. This window was weird because it was positioned really high up on the wall. You'd need a ladder to reach it from outside. There was no tree branch near it, nothing that could explain the knocking. I lay there frozen, hoping I had imagined it. Then it happened again. Knock, 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 clear and deliberate. I shot out of bed and ran to Claire's room without even thinking. I burst in, probably scaring her half to death. "There's something knocking on my window," I whispered urgently. Claire, annoyed at being woken up, rolled her eyes. "It's probably just a bird or something, Lily. Go back to bed." "No, Claire, I'm serious. It's like someone's knocking, but the window's too high for anyone to reach." She sighed dramatically. "Fine, I'll come check, but then you have to go back to your own room and let me sleep." We went back to my room, and she sat on my bed for a few minutes. Nothing happened. She gave me this look like, "See, nothing," and was about to leave when, knock, 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 her face went white. We both stared at the window, but there was nothing visible there. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "That's what I've been trying to tell you," I said. Claire slept in my room with me that night. Both of us huddled under the blankets. The knocking didn't come back while she was there. The next morning, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the wind making a loose shingle hit the side of the house or something like that, but I could tell she was shaken. A few days later, I was doing homework on my bed. I had papers spread out around me, and I was focused on a math problem when I noticed out of the corner of my eye that my papers were moving, like rustling and shifting around. I assumed it was my cat Pepper who was always messing with my stuff. I glanced up to shoo her away and froze. Pepper was curled up beside me, sound asleep, and there was no breeze in the room. The window was closed and we didn't have the AC on, but my papers were still moving, like someone was running their fingers over them. I watched, paralyzed, as one of my worksheets slid about 6 inches across the bed all by itself. Then everything went still. That was when I knew for sure our house had a ghost. Over time, we all started experiencing things. Claire admitted she'd been hearing whispering in her room at night, my old room, but had been too embarrassed to say anything. Mom started finding cabinet doors open in the kitchen when she was sure she'd closed them. The TV would turn on by itself in the middle of the night. Thomas's toys would sometimes be rearranged in the morning, though he swore he hadn't touched them. Eventually, we started referring to our ghost as Rosie. I don't even remember who came up with the name, but somehow it stuck. Having a name for it made it seem less scary, I guess, like, "Oh, Rosie's just messing with the lights again," or "Rosie must have opened that door." It became almost normal to us. There was a period of about 3 years where things calmed down. We'd still have occasional weird occurrences, but nothing major. I think we all just got used to living with Rosie. By the time I was 17, it was just a weird quirk about our house that we didn't talk about much anymore. But then my boyfriend Jake moved in with us my senior year of high school. His parents had kicked him out, and Mom took pity on him. That's when things got active again. Jake didn't know about Rosie. We'd never really told anyone outside the family about our ghost, Who would believe us anyway? So he was completely unprepared for what happened. One night, about 2 weeks after he moved in, we were in my room watching a movie on my laptop. My old baby monitor toy was sitting on my dresser. I'd kept it because it was one of those interactive ones that would light up and say phrases when it detected sound. Over the years, that toy had become one of Rosie's favorites. It would often go off randomly, saying things like, "I love you," or "let's play," when no one was near it. Sure enough, during a quiet part of the movie, the toy suddenly lit up and said, "Peekaboo, I see you." Jake jumped and looked at me. What the hell was that? I tried to play it cool. "Oh, just that old toy. It goes off sometimes. The batteries are probably dying." He seemed to accept that, and we went back to watching the movie. But the toy kept activating every few minutes, getting more and more annoying. Finally, Jake got frustrated and snapped, "Shut the fuck up!" at the toy. The room went dead silent. Even the movie seemed quieter somehow. Then very clearly the toy said, "Bye-bye" in its cheerful electronic voice, and went silent. Jake looked at me with wide eyes. "Does it usually respond like that?" I shook my head slowly. "No, never." We tried to laugh it off, but we were both freaked out. Later that night, around 3 in the morning, we were both awakened by a loud thump that came from the corner of my room where the closet was. It was so loud and sudden that Jake shot up in bed. "What the fuck was that?" he whispered. I knew exactly what it was, but I just said, "Probably nothing." He got out of bed and checked the closet, looking behind my clothes, but found nothing that could have fallen. He was so spooked, he ended up sleeping on the couch for the rest of the night. After that, Jake started noticing all the little things we'd gotten used to. Doors that would slowly swing open on their own, the sound of footsteps when no one was there, his keys or phone being moved to different places than where he'd left them. The weirdest incident happened about a month after the toy incident. Jake had gotten a puppy, a little terrier mix. One day, the puppy was running around the living room, being all hyper like puppies are. As it zoomed past the shelf where that same toy was now kept, the toy suddenly activated and very clearly said, "Run, little dog, run." Jake and I both heard it. The toy had never said that phrase before. It wasn't even one of its programmed sayings. Jake's face went pale. Did that toy just comment on my dog? We both knew it had. That night, Jake finally asked me outright if I thought the house was haunted. I told him everything. About Thomas seeing the girl years ago, about the knocking on my window, about all the strange things that had happened. He took it surprisingly well. I think by that point, he'd seen enough to believe it himself. The thing that still bothers me most about our ghost, Rosie, is that we never figured out who she was or why she was in our house. Was she the girl with glasses Thomas saw? Was she someone who had died in the house, a previous owner? We never knew. When Mom finally sold the house after I graduated and moved out for college, I remember feeling weirdly sad about leaving Rosie behind. I wonder sometimes if she's still there, knocking on windows and playing with toys to freak out the new owners. And sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment at night and I hear an unexpected sound, I catch myself thinking for just a second that maybe Rosie followed me. I don't know if that thought is comforting or terrifying. Story 4, Ombastos. I never thought I'd be typing this out, but I need to tell someone. I'm honestly at my wit's end and don't know where else to turn. I'm not even sure if anyone will believe me. I barely believe it myself, and I'm living through it. It all started about 3 weeks ago in early July. I was just going about my normal evening routine in my Lakewood home when I noticed something weird with my living room lights. I have these LED fixtures that I installed last year. Nothing fancy, just standard warm white. But that night they suddenly shifted to a cool blue tone, just like that, no warning. I figured it was just a glitch, so I turned them off and back on, and they went back to normal. But the next night, same thing happened. Only this time, when I went to fix them, they changed back on their own before I could touch the switch. I honestly didn't think much of it. Maybe there was some power fluctuation or something wrong with the bulbs. Then things got weirder. I'd come home from work and lights would be on that I know I turned off. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness. You know how it is. You're rushing out the door in the morning, maybe you didn't remember correctly. But then it started happening with appliances too. My TV would turn on by itself, my stereo would switch inputs randomly, my microwave would start running without anyone pressing a button. I called an electrician, thinking maybe there was something wrong with my wiring. He came out, checked everything and said my electrical system was fine. No shorts, no faulty wiring, nothing. He suggested maybe I had a smart home malfunction, but I don't even have that kind of setup, just regular switches and outlets. About a week in, things took a turn I still can't fully comprehend. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I felt something touch my arm, not like a brush, more like fingers trailing across my skin. I jolted upright, turned on the lamp, but there was nothing there. My skin was still tingling where I felt the touch. The next night, it happened again. Only this time, the touch was on my chest, then my stomach. I told myself it was just my imagination or maybe a weird sleep phenomenon, but I was wide awake when it happened. By the 10th day, the touching had become intimate. I know how this sounds, but something was touching me sexually. I'd feel pressure and sensation in private areas. It wasn't painful, which is perhaps why I wasn't immediately terrified. Instead, I was curious, confused, definitely, but more intrigued than afraid. Maybe that was my first mistake. I've always been interested in the paranormal. Not in a hardcore way, I don't chase ghosts or anything, but I've read books, watched documentaries. So rather than freaking out, I decided to investigate. I set up my phone to record my bedroom while I slept. I bought an EMF meter from Amazon. I even kept a detailed log of every weird occurrence. The recordings showed nothing visual, but there were unexplained sounds, little thumps and creaks that couldn't be explained by the house settling. The EMF readings were off the charts in certain corners of my bedroom, especially near my bed, and my log grew longer every day. Looking back, I should have just packed a bag and left right then, but I was still in that phase where curiosity outweighed fear. Plus, this is my home. I've lived here for 6 years. I've put work into this place. I wasn't about to be chased out by whatever this was. About 2 weeks in, everything changed. The entity, because I'm now convinced that's what it is, became aggressive. The touching became painful. I'd feel sharp, needle-like pokes on my back, my legs, even the soles of my feet. I'd be sitting on my couch watching TV and suddenly feel like someone had jabbed me with a pin. Once, while cooking dinner, I felt what I can only describe as teeth biting into my shoulder. I dropped a pot of pasta, scalding water splashing everywhere, and the energy drain. God, the energy drain. I started waking up more exhausted than when I went to bed. It's like something was feeding off me while I slept. Some mornings, I could barely drag myself to the shower. I've had to call in sick to work twice this week because I just couldn't function. Sleep has become almost impossible. As soon as I lie down, this high-pitched ringing starts in my ears, like tinnitus but worse, and it only happens at night. When I do manage to drift off, I'm jolted awake by what feels like something crawling across my bed. I've thrown the covers off countless times, expecting to see a mouse or even a bug, but there's never anything there, just the impression in the mattress, like something with weight had been there seconds before. Last night was the worst so far. I finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, only to be woken up by what felt like electrical shocks on the bottoms of my feet. Not enough to cause damage, but painful enough that I screamed and leapt out of bed. Then the lights started, flashing on and off, all through the house, not just flickering, but full-on strobing. I ran to the breaker box and cut power to the whole house, but even in the darkness, I could feel it all around me, watching, waiting, almost laughing. I tried smudging with sage yesterday. I'd read online that it can clear negative energy. Instead of helping, it seemed to make the entity angry. The electrical disturbances got worse. My cell phone died even though it was fully charged. My laptop crashed and wouldn't restart for hours, and the TV kept changing to static no matter what I was watching. I tried burning incense, using protection crystals. Yeah, I was desperate enough to try anything, even playing religious music through my speakers. Nothing helped. If anything, each attempt to fight back just provoked it further. I even contacted this spiritual healer I found online. She did a remote cleansing session where she guided me through these rituals over video chat. She seemed concerned by what I described and said she could sense a dark attachment that was unusually strong. During the session, my internet connection kept cutting out, and at one point, she said she saw a shadow move behind me. There was no one else in my house. The session ended when my laptop suddenly shut down, and when I managed to restart it and call her back, she refused to continue, said she didn't want to put herself at risk. That really scared me. If a professional healer was afraid, what chance did I have? I should mention that I've dealt with my share of mental health issues in the past. I struggled with substance abuse for a few years in my 20s and have had episodes of depression. But I've been clean for 4 years now and have been seeing a therapist regularly. I'm in a good place mentally, or at least I was until this started happening, and that's what makes this so terrifying. I know what depression feels like. I know what substance-induced hallucinations feel like. This is different. This is real, physical, tangible. The entity seems to know about my past struggles too. Sometimes I hear whispers suggesting I should start drinking again, that a few pills would help me sleep. It's like it's trying to push me back into my old patterns. Yesterday, I tried to meditate, something my therapist taught me for stress management. As soon as I closed my eyes, I felt like I was being watched from every corner of the room. Then the touching started again, fingers running through my hair, hands on my shoulders. I tried to maintain my breathing, to center myself, but then something squeezed my throat. Not enough to choke me, but enough to make it clear it could if it wanted to. I've lost 7 pounds in the last 2 weeks. I'm barely eating. Food doesn't even taste right anymore. Everything has this metallic aftertaste. I'm surviving on protein bars and water. Even coffee tastes wrong, which for a caffeine addict like me is its own special hell. I tried sleeping at a hotel last night. I checked in around 9 p.m., took a long hot shower, and actually felt a bit of relief. Like maybe I'd left it behind at the house. I watched some mindless TV and felt myself getting drowsy around 11, the earliest I've felt sleepy in weeks. But just as I was drifting off, the bathroom light turned on by itself. Then the faucet started running. I told myself it was just faulty wiring in the hotel, but deep down, I knew. It had followed me. I returned home this morning, defeated. If I can't escape it by leaving, what options do I have left? Right now, I'm sitting in my kitchen writing this. The lights have flickered 3 times since I started typing. My coffee went cold, unnaturally fast. And there's a pressure on the back of my neck, like someone's standing right behind me, breathing on my skin. I don't know what to do next. I've considered reaching out to paranormal investigators, but I'm worried about inviting more people into this nightmare. What if it attaches to them too? I couldn't live with that guilt. I'm not religious, but I'm thinking about contacting a local priest, maybe an exorcism or blessing. I don't even know if that works on houses or if it's just for people. The worst part is the isolation. I can't tell my friends or family. They'd think I've relapsed or lost my mind. My therapist would probably suggest increasing my sessions or changing my medication. There's no way to explain this to someone who hasn't experienced it. So I'm reaching out here to strangers who might understand. Has anyone dealt with something like this? Is there any way to get rid of a parasitic entity that seems to be feeding off your energy and sanity? I just felt those fingers on my arm again. It knows I'm writing about it. The lights are flickering faster now. My phone just vibrated with no notification. I think I need to stop writing before it gets angrier. If anyone has any advice, please share it. I don't know how much longer I can. Story 5. I still don't know how to explain what happened to me. I've never been a believer in the supernatural. always the skeptical one in my friend group who needed proof for everything. But after what I experienced, first at Elena's cabin and then in my own home years later, I can't deny that something is out there, something that watches us. It all started back in 2018 when I was visiting my then girlfriend Elena at her family's cabin. The place was about 2 hours north of my hometown, tucked away in this densely wooded area where cell service was spotty at best. Elena had mentioned before that her house was a bit haunted, but I laughed it off. She'd tell me stories about hearing footsteps in the living room above her basement bedroom when her mom was away on business trips, and sometimes even knocking sounds that would respond to her questions. I thought she was either making it up or the house was just settling. Old cabins make all kinds of noises. The cabin itself was nothing special, just a 2-story wooden structure with a finished basement where Elena had her bedroom. Her mom had renovated it years ago, but it still had that rustic vibe with creaky floorboards and drafty windows. The basement was actually pretty cozy, with Elena's bed against one wall and a small bathroom off to the side. The stairs leading up to the main floor were directly across from the bed. I remember arriving there on a Friday evening after work. Elena's mom was away for the weekend, so we had the place to ourselves. We spent the evening cooking dinner, watching movies, and catching up. Everything was perfectly normal. We went to bed around midnight in her basement room. I woke up suddenly, completely disoriented. The room was pitch black, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. My phone was dead, but the digital clock on Elena's nightstand read 2:47 a.m. Elena was sound asleep beside me. I felt unnaturally alert, like something had deliberately woken me up. That's when I got this feeling, this overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. Not just Elena and me, but something else, something watching. I turned toward the stairway, and my blood turned to ice. There, peering around the corner at the bottom of the stairs, was a black silhouette of a man. Not just a shadow, but a 3-dimensional figure with no features, no face, just darkness in the shape of a person. It was leaning slightly, like it was intentionally looking into the room, at me. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I just stared at it and it stared back. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt it looking at me. We stayed like that for what felt like a full minute. Though it might have been less, I was too terrified to reach for my phone or wake Elena. Then slowly, so slowly it was almost more terrifying than if it had rushed at me, it pulled back around the corner, not walking away, just retreating from view, as if sliding backwards. I lay there frozen, heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake Elena. I kept staring at that corner, expecting it to return. Eventually, I closed my eyes, pulled the blanket over my head like a child, and somehow managed to fall back asleep from pure exhaustion. When morning came, I was half convinced I'd dreamed the whole thing. The basement looked so normal in the daylight streaming through the small windows near the ceiling. Elena was already up making coffee when I dragged myself upstairs. "You look like crap," she said, handing me a mug. "Bad dreams?" I hesitated before telling her what I'd seen. I expected her to be shocked, or at least concerned, but her reaction caught me completely off guard. "Oh yeah, that happens sometimes," she said casually, like I'd just mentioned seeing a squirrel in the yard. "Don't worry about it. Whatever's in the house never comes all the way into my room. It just looks." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What do you mean, whatever's in the house? You've seen it too?" She shrugged. "Not exactly like that. I hear it more than see it. Footsteps upstairs when no one's home, sometimes knocking on my walls at night." "And that doesn't freak you out?" I asked, feeling a chill despite the hot coffee in my hands. "You get used to it," she replied. "Mom says it's been here since before we moved in." I tried to act normal for the rest of the morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. We were sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast when I noticed something in my peripheral vision, a dark shape standing in the doorway to the living room. When I turned to look directly at it, there was nothing there. This happened 3 or 4 times, always just out of the corner of my eye. Elena noticed me jumping at shadows and suggested we go for a hike to clear my head. I was grateful to get out of the house for a while. When we returned that afternoon, Elena's mom had come home early. She was a short, stout woman with a thick Russian accent who always treated me warmly. While Elena was showering, her mom found me still looking nervously around the house. "Elena told me you saw our domovoi last night," she said, smiling slightly. "Your what?" I asked. "Domovoi, house spirits from old country." She sat across from me at the kitchen table. "We have two here. They protect home." I didn't know what to say to that. House spirits? Protecting the home by scaring the crap out of guests? "My ex-husband, Elena's father, he stayed here alone once after we divorced," she continued. "He called me in middle of night, screaming like baby, said two creatures following him around house. Everywhere he went, they went. He never came back." She laughed like this was a fond memory. "So, they're not dangerous?" I asked cautiously. She waved her hand dismissively. "Only dangerous if you disrespect house. They are guardians." I nodded like this made perfect sense, but inside I was freaking out. I didn't stay another night. I made up some excuse about an early meeting on Sunday, kissed Elena goodbye, and drove the 2 hours back to my apartment. Elena and I broke up a few months later for unrelated reasons, and I never went back to that cabin. I convinced myself over time that it had been my imagination, or maybe I was half asleep and saw something ordinary that my brain misinterpreted. I dated other people, moved to a different town, and eventually met Sarah in early 2020. We moved in together pretty quickly when a nice rental house became available, a small 2-story place with an attic. The landlord mentioned casually that the house had some history, but wouldn't elaborate. Our neighbor later told us that the previous owner had died in the house, possibly by suicide in the attic, but it was all rumors and gossip. I didn't think much of it until about 3 months after we moved in. Sarah and I were doing some spring cleaning and decided to finally tackle the attic. It was mostly empty, except for some old furniture the landlord had left behind. The space was dusty and had that distinct old house smell, musty and stale. There was a single bulb hanging from the center of the ceiling that cast long shadows across the angled walls. I was checking for any leaks or signs of water damage when I felt it, a sudden drop in temperature. It wasn't subtle. It was like walking from a heated room into a freezer. Sarah felt it too because she stopped what she was doing and looked at me. "Did you feel that?" she asked. Before I could answer, I noticed something in the far corner of the attic. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from the bare light bulb, but then I realized it had a distinct shape. The silhouette of a woman in a dress pressed against the wall, and there were eyes, angry, hateful eyes, staring directly at me. "Sarah," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the corner. "Do you see that?" She followed my gaze and gasped. "What the fuck is that?" The figure didn't move, but those eyes, they were filled with such rage and pain that I could physically feel it. Then, between one blink and the next, it was gone. But the cold remained, and now it felt like it was touching me, icy hands on my shoulders and neck. We both ran for the attic stairs, nearly falling down them in our panic. Sarah was shaking when we reached the living room, and I wasn't much better. "That was a person," she kept saying. "That was a fucking person in our attic." We called the police, who came and found nothing. They thought we'd seen an intruder, but there was no sign of forced entry, and nowhere someone could have gone. The officer looked at us like we were crazy or on drugs. After they left, Sarah dug out some sage she had from her witchy phase in college and burned it throughout the house, focusing on the attic. The heavy feeling seemed to lift a bit after that, but I still couldn't shake the connection between what I'd seen at Elena's cabin and what was in our attic. The woman's silhouette was different from the male figure I'd seen years before, but there was something similar about them, that sense of watching, of awareness, and both times they appeared in places with tragic histories. We still live in that house. We've had a few more incidents, items moving, cold spots, the occasional glimpse of something dark in peripheral vision. Sarah talks about moving, but rental prices have gone up so much we can't afford to leave right now. I've tried researching what these things might be. Some cultures call them shadow people, others say they're manifestations of negative energy or even demons. Elena's mom called them domovoi, protective spirits. Whatever they are, I know they're real. The worst part isn't the fear anymore, it's the uncertainty. Are they following me specifically? Was it just coincidence that I encountered similar entities in two different places, or is there something about me that attracts them? Sometimes at night I still feel like I'm being watched. I'll wake up suddenly, heart racing, convinced that if I turn toward the bedroom door, I'll see that featureless silhouette staring at me again. So far I haven't, but I know it's out there somewhere, in the shadows, waiting. Story 6. I've always considered myself pretty level-headed, not the type to jump at shadows or believe in ghosts, but something happened in my home about 3 months ago that I still can't explain, and it's been eating away at me ever since. I thought writing it down might help me process it, or maybe someone here has experienced something similar. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house in Millfield, a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing particularly exciting ever happens. I've been here for almost 7 years now. It's just me, my miniature poodle Daisy. She's 11 years old but still pretty spry despite some arthritis. And my 2 pet rats, Pepper and Salt. I know, not the most original names, but they fit. That night started like any other. It was a Tuesday in late October, nothing special about it. I remember it was chilly outside, and I had turned the heat up a bit before settling into bed around 10:30. I'm a night owl and usually read for an hour or so before actually sleeping. Daisy has her own little memory foam bed next to mine on the floor, but sometimes she jumps up to cuddle, especially when it's cold. I was deeply engrossed in my book, some mystery thriller I'd picked up at the library, when I first felt it. The subtle vibration of small feet walking around the perimeter of my bed. It's a sensation any pet owner would recognize instantly. The mattress shifts slightly. You feel those tiny footsteps. Daisy has this habit of circling the bed a couple times before she decides where to settle. I didn't even look up from my book at first, just continued reading, absent-mindedly reaching out my hand to pat the spot next to me, expecting her to jump up any second. But she didn't. The footsteps continued their circuit around the bed, pitter-patter, pitter-patter, that unmistakable sound of little dog nails on hardwood. 1 circuit, 2 circuits. After the 3rd time around, I finally lowered my book, a bit annoyed. "Come on, Daisy, make up your mind," I said, looking toward the foot of the bed. Nothing was there. I frowned, peering over the edge of the mattress, expecting to see her still walking around. Still nothing. The footsteps had stopped the moment I looked. "Daisy?" I called, not loudly, just a normal speaking voice. That's when I noticed her curled up in her bed on the floor, not just resting there, but properly asleep. The kind of deep sleep where they're twitching slightly, lost in dog dreams. Her position and the impression in her bed made it obvious she'd been there for quite some time. A cold feeling washed over me. I clearly felt and heard something circling my bed, something Daisy-sized, something that moved exactly like her. I reached for my bedside lamp and switched it on, the sudden brightness making me squint. Daisy didn't even stir. She really was out cold. I sat there for a moment, trying to rationalize what had happened. Maybe I was just tired and had imagined it. But no, the sensation had been too distinct, too familiar. I know what my dog sounds like when she walks around my bed. That's when I noticed something else odd. My rat's cage sits on a dresser across the room. It's one of those multi-level wire cages with ramps and platforms, and there, sitting calmly on top of the closed cage, was Pepper, my black and white rat. Just sitting there, grooming himself. This made absolutely no sense. In the 3 years I've had rats, neither had ever escaped their cage. The cage door was still securely latched. Even if Pepper had somehow gotten out, there was no way he could have climbed back up the smooth sides of the dresser to sit on top of his own cage. It would be physically impossible for him. I carefully got out of bed, not wanting to disturb whatever strange thing was happening. The floor creaked under my feet as I approached the rat cage. Pepper looked at me with those beady little eyes, completely unbothered, like there was nothing unusual about his situation. I held out my hand and he climbed onto it without hesitation. Definitely real, definitely Pepper. "How did you get out there, buddy?" I whispered, checking the cage. Salt was inside, asleep in their little fabric hammock. The cage door was closed with the latch in place. All the sides were intact. There was literally no way Pepper could have gotten out on his own. I put him back inside with his brother and double-checked the latch, my heart now pounding in my chest. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, the silence suddenly oppressive. Nothing seemed out of place besides what I'd already noticed, but the air felt different, heavier somehow, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I checked my phone, 11:23. Not that late, but late enough that calling someone would seem crazy. And what would I even say? Hey, something was pretending to be my dog and my rat teleported. I considered whether I might be sick. Maybe I had a fever and was hallucinating. I touched my forehead. Normal. I hadn't been drinking, hadn't taken any medication. I was tired, sure, but not exhaustion-level tired where you start seeing things. I went to the bathroom and splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. My reflection looked normal, if a bit pale. I took a few deep breaths and decided to be rational about this. I would go back to bed, try to sleep, and things would make more sense in the morning. But as I walked back into my bedroom, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Daisy was still in her bed, still sound asleep, but now there was a slight indentation on my mattress, right where I would expect her to jump up and lie down, a small, circular depression about the size of a curled-up miniature poodle. It wasn't there before, I'm certain of it. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at that indentation. My rational mind immediately tried to come up with explanations. Maybe I'd been sitting there earlier and didn't remember. Maybe it was just how the blankets were arranged. But I knew something had climbed onto my bed while I was in the bathroom, something invisible. I don't know where I found the courage, but I walked over to my bed and cautiously reached out to touch the indentation. The spot was warm. Not hot, not body temperature, but unnaturally warm, like a place where something had been lying that didn't quite match human or animal heat. That's when I heard it again, the pitter-patter of small feet, but not on the floor this time, on my bed, moving across the comforter. I could see the fabric depressing slightly with each step, making a direct line toward me. I backed away, bumping into my dresser. The movement stopped. "Hello?" I said, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. "What do you want?" No response, of course, just the suffocating silence of my bedroom at night. Even the usual house sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing outside, seemed muted, as if something was dampening all normal noise. I looked at Daisy again, still asleep, completely oblivious to whatever was happening. I envied her. The rational part of my brain was now working overtime. Maybe I was experiencing some kind of neurological event, carbon monoxide poisoning, but the CO detector in the hallway wasn't beeping, and neither of those would explain the physical evidence. Pepper outside his cage, the indentation on my bed. I decided to do a quick check of the house, just to rule out any mundane explanations. I turned on every light as I went, checking closets, looking under furniture, making sure all windows and doors were locked. Everything was normal, no signs of intrusion, nothing out of place. When I returned to my bedroom, the indentation on my bed was gone. The comforter was smooth, as if nothing had ever been there. Pepper and Salt were both in their cage, the latch still secured. Daisy had finally woken up and was looking at me with sleepy confusion, probably wondering why I was pacing around at midnight with all the lights on. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to decide what to do. Sleep seemed impossible now. I considered going to a hotel, but that felt like an overreaction. This was my home. I wasn't going to be chased out by whatever this was. I decided to stay up, keep the lights on, and see if anything else happened. I grabbed my laptop and sat up against the headboard, Daisy now curled up beside me, the real Daisy, warm and solid and snoring slightly. I started researching, typing phrases like invisible entity mimicking pets and paranormal activity with animals. Most of what I found was typical ghost story stuff, nothing that matched my experience exactly. But one theory caught my attention: the idea that some paranormal phenomena might be what psychics call residual hauntings. Not an actual spirit or entity with consciousness, but more like an energetic recording of past events that plays back under certain conditions, like how you might hear phantom footsteps in an old house that follow the exact same path every time. But that didn't explain Pepper being on top of his cage. A residual haunting wouldn't be able to physically move things. And anyway, the recording would have to be of something that actually happened in the past. Daisy walks around my bed all the time, sure, but Pepper had never escaped his cage before. Another theory suggested that intense emotional states can sometimes manifest as poltergeist-like activity. But I hadn't been stressed or emotional before this started. It was just an ordinary Tuesday night. Around 2 in the morning, I felt it again, that same sensation of small feet on the mattress. But this time, I could see the impressions forming right in front of me. Tiny circular depressions appearing one after another across my comforter, coming straight toward where I sat. Daisy noticed it too. She lifted her head, ears perked forward, watching the invisible progression with alert eyes. She didn't seem scared, just interested, curious, like she was seeing another dog. The footsteps stopped right in front of us. I felt the mattress dip slightly, as if something small had sat down. Daisy tilted her head, that classic dog look of confusion. She gave a single tentative wag of her tail. Then she did something that chilled me to the bone. She leaned forward and licked the air in front of her. Not randomly, precisely, as if she were licking something's face. Something that I couldn't see, but she could. I sat perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Daisy continued to interact with the invisible presence, wagging her tail now, her body language completely relaxed. Whatever she was seeing or sensing, it didn't frighten her. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute, the mattress shifted again and those invisible footsteps padded away, off the bed, and then silence. Daisy looked at me, then curled back up as if nothing unusual had happened. I didn't sleep at all that night. Nothing else occurred. No more phantom footsteps, no more displaced rats. By morning, I had almost convinced myself that I'd experienced some kind of waking dream, some bizarre but explainable psychological event. But I know what I felt. I know what I saw. Something was in my house that night, something that could perfectly mimic my dog's movements and somehow manipulate my rat. Something that Daisy could see or sense when I couldn't. It's been 3 months, and it hasn't happened again. I've had the house checked for gas leaks, had a full medical workup including a neurological exam, even had a paranormal investigator come by. They found nothing unusual, of course. I still live here with Daisy and the rats. Everything is normal, but sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I think I hear those faint footsteps circling my bed, and I lie very still, eyes closed, waiting to see what happens next. Story 7. I've never really shared this with anyone outside my immediate family. It's been about 3 months since it happened, and I still get goosebumps thinking about it. My wife says I should just forget it and move on, but I can't. I keep replaying it in my head, trying to make sense of what happened. My name's Daniel, I'm 34, and my wife Amira and I have lived in our house in the historic Millfield district for almost 6 years now. It's a beautiful old place, built in the 1920s with all the character and quirks you'd expect. Creaky floorboards, strange drafts, the works. But we've always loved it, and until recently, I never felt uncomfortable here. About 3 months ago, right at the beginning of Ramadan, I started getting this weird feeling about the mirrors in our house. We had quite a few of them, a large one in the hallway, one in the living room, and several decorative ones that Amira had placed throughout the house. I'm not normally superstitious or anything, but something about their placement suddenly started bothering me. It was especially this one mirror in the upstairs hallway that faced our bedroom door. I'd walk past it and feel this pressure, like someone was watching me. I know how that sounds, but it wasn't like I was seeing things in the mirror. It was more like the mirror itself was wrong somehow. One night, I finally mentioned it to Amira. She laughed at first, but when she saw I was serious, she got concerned. "You've never been bothered by the mirrors before," she said. "Why now?" I couldn't explain it. It was just this gut feeling that wouldn't go away. After a few days of me being visibly uncomfortable, Amira agreed to rearrange them. She moved the hallway mirror to our bedroom and relocated the others to different walls. There was one spot in the living room where we completely removed a mirror and left the wall bare. That empty space on the wall, it bothered me almost as much as the mirrors had, like it was incomplete somehow. But I figured I was just being ridiculous and tried to put it out of my mind. For about a week after that, the house felt different. Not better. Actually, worse in some ways. There was this restless energy, like the house was unsettled. Amira said she didn't notice anything, but I felt it. The air seemed heavier, especially in the living room where that empty space was. Our cat, Milo, started acting weird too, refusing to go into certain rooms, staring at empty corners. I've always been sensitive to this kind of thing. As a kid, I used to see shadows moving in my peripheral vision all the time. My grandmother said I had the sight, whatever that means. But I hadn't experienced anything like that in years, not since my early 20s, and I'd kind of convinced myself I'd outgrown it or something. Then came that night. It was a Wednesday, I remember, because I'd been fasting all day and was particularly tired. It was about 10 in the evening and Amira had gone upstairs to pray. I was lying on the couch in the living room, half watching some documentary on Netflix, when I heard it. A voice, a young girl's voice, coming from underneath the couch I was lying on. At first I thought it was coming from the TV, but I'd muted it when Amira went upstairs. Then I thought maybe it was coming from outside, but our windows were closed because of the air conditioning. The voice was clear as day, saying something I couldn't quite make out, but definitely in English and definitely a child's voice. Now I've had experiences before where I thought I heard something, a voice or a sound, but as soon as I acknowledged it or tried to focus on it, it would disappear, and I could write it off as my imagination. This was different. This voice continued even after I sat up and said out loud, "Did I just hear that?" The voice kept talking, this soft little girl voice murmuring something underneath me. I couldn't make out the words exactly, but it sounded like she was reciting something, almost like a poem or a song. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably there. I froze. My whole body went cold. Then I saw Milo, who had been sleeping on the armchair across from me, suddenly lift his head and stare directly at the couch, right where the voice was coming from. His ears perked up, and his eyes followed something I couldn't see, tracking it as if watching something move. That was when I knew this wasn't in my head. Milo could hear it too. "What the hell is that?" I said out loud, my voice cracking. The voice continued for another second or two, and then I started reciting Ayatul Kursi, a prayer from the Quran that my mother always told me to recite when I was scared. As soon as I started praying, the voice stopped. The sudden silence was almost as terrifying as the voice had been. Milo was still staring intently at the space under the couch, his tail swishing back and forth. I sat there for what felt like forever, afraid to move. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, I gathered enough courage to get down on my hands and knees and look under the couch. There was nothing there, just some dust bunnies and one of Milo's toys. I called out for Amira, trying to keep my voice steady. She came downstairs and found me standing in the middle of the living room, probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. When I told her what happened, she didn't dismiss it outright, which I appreciated. She knows I don't make this stuff up. "But it's Ramadan," she said, looking confused. "The shayateen are supposed to be chained up during Ramadan. That's what made it even more unsettling. In our faith, during the holy month of Ramadan, evil spirits, jinn, devils, demons, are believed to be restrained. It's supposed to be a time of peace when we're protected from these influences. So why was I hearing a child's voice under our couch? The only thing I could think of was the mirrors. In many cultures, Mirrors are believed to be portals or doorways. Could moving them have disrupted something, opened something that should have stayed closed? After that night, I couldn't relax in the living room anymore. I kept feeling like something was watching me, especially from that empty space on the wall where the mirror used to be. Sometimes I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, but when I'd turn to look, there'd be nothing there. A mirror suggested we move the mirrors back to their original positions, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What if that made things worse? What if the voice came back, louder this time? 3 nights after the incident, I was up late working on my laptop in the kitchen. Amira had gone to bed hours before, and the house was completely silent. I heard footsteps upstairs, moving from our bedroom toward the stairs. I assumed it was Amira getting up to use the bathroom or get a drink. "Amira," I called out, no response. The footsteps stopped. I got up and went to the bottom of the stairs. "Amira, do you need something?" Still nothing. I climbed the stairs, my heart starting to race again. When I reached our bedroom, I found Amira fast asleep. She hadn't moved. I checked the guest room, the bathroom, everywhere upstairs. No one. As I was standing in the hallway, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the footsteps, I caught a glimpse of something in the bedroom mirror, the one that used to face our door. For just a split second, I thought I saw a reflection that wasn't mine, a small figure standing behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the empty hallway. That was when I decided we needed help. The next day, I called my uncle, who's pretty knowledgeable about Islamic traditions regarding the supernatural. He came over and performed a blessing on the house, reciting specific verses from the Quran in each room. He also advised us to play recordings of Quranic recitations throughout the day. For a few days after his visit, things seemed better. The heavy feeling in the air lifted somewhat, and I stopped hearing strange noises. But then, exactly 1 week after I'd heard the voice, something else happened. I was home alone. Amira was at her sister's place helping with wedding preparations. I was in the shower when I heard what sounded like someone knocking on the bathroom door. 3 distinct knocks. "Hello?" I called out, thinking maybe Amira had come home early. No answer. I turned off the water and listened. Nothing. I quickly dried off and wrapped a towel around myself. When I opened the bathroom door, the hallway was empty, but I noticed something odd. The mirror in our bedroom, the one that had been moved from the hallway, had been turned to face the wall. I know I didn't do that, and Amira had been gone all day. I turned the mirror back around, my hands shaking. As I did, I caught my reflection, but something was off. For a brief moment, my reflection seemed delayed, like it took a half-second too long to mirror my movements. That night when Amira came home, I told her everything. She suggested we get rid of all the mirrors, but that seemed extreme. Instead, we decided to cover them with sheets for the night and figure out what to do in the morning. We went to bed early, both exhausted from the stress of it all. I was almost asleep when I heard Amira gasp beside me. "Daniel," she whispered. "Did you hear that?" I listened. At first, there was nothing. Then I heard it. The same soft, childlike voice I'd heard under the couch, only now it seemed to be coming from inside the walls. It was singing something, a melody I didn't recognize with words I couldn't quite make out. Amira heard it too. She clutched my arm so tight her nails dug into my skin. "What is that?" she whispered. The singing continued for maybe 30 seconds, then faded away. We both sat up in bed, too frightened to move. Then Milo, who was sleeping at the foot of our bed, suddenly arched his back and hissed at the wall where the voice had been coming from. That was the last straw. The next morning, we packed some essentials and went to stay with Amira's parents. We told them our AC was broken. We didn't want to explain what was really happening. We stayed away for 3 days. When we came back, the house seemed normal again. No voices, no strange reflections, no footsteps. The oppressive feeling was gone. We cautiously removed the sheets from the mirrors, half expecting something to happen, but nothing did. For a while, we thought it was over. We made it through the rest of Ramadan without incident. But then just last week, I was home alone again. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard someone whisper my name right behind me. I turned around, and of course, no one was there. But in the reflection of the kitchen window, just for a second, I saw her. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with long dark hair and pale skin, standing right behind me. I haven't told Amira about this latest incident. I don't want to scare her again, but I've started researching the history of our house, trying to find out if a child died here or if there's some other explanation for what we've been experiencing. I still don't know if moving those mirrors triggered something or if it was just a coincidence that this all started during Ramadan when we're supposed to be protected from such things. All I know is that I'm afraid to be alone in my own home now, and I keep catching glimpses of that little girl in reflective surfaces, not just mirrors, but windows, the TV screen when it's turned off, even the screen of my phone sometimes. I don't know what to do. I don't know what she wants. All I know is that she's still here, watching us, and I'm terrified of what might happen if she decides to do more than just watch. Story 8. I don't even know where to start with this. My hands are still shaking as I type this, but I need to get it out. I've been carrying this around for weeks now, and I can't sleep without seeing his face. My best friend Nolan died back in 2020, overdose. It was the worst day of my life when I got that call. We'd been friends since middle school. 15 years of friendship gone in an instant. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor for hours after I found out, just staring at the wall. We'd talked about getting clean so many times. He was doing better, or at least I thought he was. 4 years later, I still catch myself reaching for my phone to text him when something funny happens. That's the thing nobody tells you about grief. It doesn't really end. It just changes shape. When I proposed to my now wife Ellie last year, Nolan was the first person I wanted to tell. I actually did type out a whole message to him before I remembered. Old habits. When we started planning the wedding for this September, I knew right away I couldn't replace him as a groomsman. There were supposed to be 5 of us, me, Nolan, and 3 other friends from college. Everyone understood when I said I was keeping his spot open. No one could fill his shoes anyway. I even bought all the groomsmen gifts in sets of 5. I figured I'd give Nolan's to his dad after the wedding. Just felt right somehow. About 4 months before the wedding, we had to switch vets for Ellie's cat, Jasper. Our regular place raised their prices, and this new clinic had good reviews and was closer to our apartment. Nothing weird about that, right? Just a normal adult decision. The first appointment went fine. They took Jasper's info. I filled out all the paperwork, and they sent us home with some flea medication. 2 weeks later, I got a weird call from Nolan's dad, Mr. Thompson. He sounded freaked out. He asked if I'd been thinking about Nolan a lot lately, which was a strange question, but I mean, yeah, with the wedding coming up and his empty spot, he was on my mind constantly. Mr. Thompson explained that he'd been receiving automated text messages from a vet clinic about appointment reminders for his dog, also named Jasper. The thing is, their dog died almost 10 years ago. The texts started coming out of nowhere, and he couldn't figure out why. He thought maybe it was just a mix-up, so he went to the clinic to sort it out. Here's where it gets really weird. When he got there, the receptionist was confused because they had no record of him or his dog in their system. Nothing under Thompson, nothing for a dog named Jasper that had died years ago. They apologized and suggested it must be a technical glitch. Then Mr. Thompson asked if they had any clients named Marcus Holloway with a pet named Jasper. The receptionist checked and confirmed that yes, I was a client there with a cat named Jasper. But their system shouldn't have been sending messages to Mr. Thompson. They had my correct contact info. I felt a chill run through my body when he told me this. It was the same clinic his family had used for their dog when Nolan was a kid. I'd had no idea when I chose it. Out of all the vet clinics in our area, I picked the exact same one that Nolan's family had used, and our pets had the same name. Mr. Thompson was quiet for a minute on the phone, and then his voice cracked as he asked, "Do you have anything major happening in your life right now, Marcus?" When I told him about the wedding, he started crying. Not just a few tears, he was sobbing. "I think Nolan is pissed he can't be at your wedding," he said. I didn't know what to say. I'm not really a superstitious person, but this felt too specific to be coincidence. Why would texts about my cat be going to Nolan's dad? The clinic had no explanation. They even showed Mr. Thompson their system records, and there was nothing connecting his contact info to my account. The next few months leading up to the wedding were emotionally draining. I'd catch myself staring at the empty hangar where Nolan's suit should have been during fittings. During the bachelor party, I kept expecting to hear his laugh from the other side of the room. I even left an empty chair at the rehearsal dinner with his name card. The wedding itself was beautiful but bittersweet. Walking down the aisle and seeing that gap where he should have been standing hit me hard. We had a small tribute to him in the program, and during the reception, I made sure to acknowledge him in my speech. I could see his parents in the crowd, both of them trying to hold it together. After the wedding, I gave Mr. Thompson the gift I'd bought for Nolan, a personalized flask with his initials that matched the ones I'd given the other groomsmen. Mr. Thompson hugged me for what felt like 5 minutes, neither of us saying a word. The texts to Mr. Thompson stopped after the wedding, just completely ceased. The clinic still couldn't explain why they happened in the first place, but at least they weren't a constant reminder anymore. Fast forward to 3 weeks ago, around my birthday in November. I'd been feeling down all day. Nolan always made a big deal out of birthdays, and this was the 4th one I'd spent without him. I went to bed early that night, exhausted from pretending to be happy about turning 32. That's when I had the dream. It felt different from regular dreams, more vivid, more real. I could smell the air, feel the weight of the boxes in my hands. In the dream, I was helping our mutual friend Dave move between houses. We were loading boxes into a car parked on the street. Everything was so normal, so mundane. We were joking around, complaining about how heavy everything was. It didn't feel like a dream at all. I walked back into the house to grab another box. When I came back outside, Dave was gone, but standing next to the car was Nolan. My heart nearly stopped. He looked exactly like I remembered him. Same messy brown hair, same crooked smile. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt and jeans. Nothing fancy. But what caught my attention was that he was holding something. The groomsman gift I'd given to his dad. The flask was in his hands, and he was turning it over, looking at the engraving. I tried to call out to him, but no sound came out. He looked up at me and smiled. Not a sad smile, but the kind of genuine smile he'd give when he was truly happy about something. He held up the flask, nodded at me like he was saying thanks, and then turned and started walking down the street. I tried to run after him, but my feet wouldn't move. It was like they were glued to the pavement. I struggled, desperate to catch up to him, to say all the things I never got to say. But I couldn't move an inch. I just stood there, watching as he got smaller and smaller in the distance until he turned a corner and disappeared. That's when I woke up, tears streaming down my face, gasping for air. Ellie was shaking me, asking if I was okay. Apparently, I'd been crying in my sleep. I couldn't explain it to her right away. It took me almost an hour to calm down enough to tell her about the dream. Here's the thing. I'm not someone who remembers dreams. I almost never do. But this one has stayed with me. Crystal clear, like a memory rather than a dream. I can close my eyes right now and see every detail of his face, the way the sun hit his hair, how he turned the flask over in his hands. The day after the dream, I called Mr. Thompson. I was hesitant to bring it up, worried he'd think I was losing it. But I needed to know if anything strange had happened on his end. When I described the dream, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then Mr. Thompson told me something that made my skin crawl. The flask I'd given him after the wedding, the one meant for Nolan, had disappeared from their house. They'd kept it on a shelf with some of Nolan's other things, but that morning they noticed it was gone. They'd been looking everywhere for it, thinking maybe it had fallen or been moved, but it was nowhere to be found. I don't know what to make of any of this. The texts, the dream, the missing flask. I'm not religious or spiritual, but I can't shake the feeling that Nolan found a way to be at my wedding after all, that somehow he wanted to let me know he was there and that he appreciated me keeping his place. It's been 3 weeks since the dream, and I haven't had another one like it. The texts haven't resumed. The flask is still missing. But sometimes when I'm alone in the car or just before I fall asleep, I get this feeling like he's nearby, watching over me. I don't expect anyone to believe this. Hell, I'm not sure I believe it myself. But I needed to write it down, to tell someone, because whether it was all just a bizarre coincidence or something more, it brought me a kind of peace I hadn't felt since he died. Like maybe the connections we make with people don't completely disappear when they're gone. I still miss him every day. But now when I think of him, alongside the sadness, there's also this strange comfort. Like maybe he found his way to my wedding after all, and maybe he's still around in ways I can't understand. I just wish I could have moved in that dream, could have reached him before he disappeared around that corner. There's still so much I want to tell him. Story 9. I still get goosebumps when I think about what happened that Halloween weekend in 2015. I'm not normally the type to believe in ghosts or paranormal stuff, but what happened in Ryan's old house in Portland that night, I just can't explain it. I'd traveled to Portland to visit Ryan, my friend from college. We had plans to catch a Trailblazers game on Halloween weekend, kind of a tradition we'd started a few years back. Ryan lived in this ancient house with 3 other guys, one of those classic Portland homes that's probably been standing since the early 1900s, the kind with creaky floorboards, doors that never quite close right, and that distinct smell of old wood and history. The house had all these weird quirks. The stairs would make this awful groaning sound, even if you were trying to be quiet. The kitchen cabinets would sometimes pop open on their own. Ryan blamed it on the house settling. But the weirdest feature was this old laundry chute that connected the upstairs bathroom to the basement cellar where the washing machines were. It was basically a square shaft in the wall with a little door, probably installed decades ago when people thought it was convenient to drop dirty clothes down a hole rather than carry them downstairs. When I arrived that Friday afternoon, Ryan showed me around, including the basement where I'd be doing laundry if I needed to. That cellar gave me the creeps instantly. The washing machines looked relatively new, but they were surrounded by all this abandoned furniture. Old chairs with torn upholstery, a dusty vanity missing its mirror, even an ancient rocking horse that honestly looked like something out of a horror movie. Everything was covered in cobwebs and dust. Ryan explained that the furniture belonged to previous tenants and nobody had bothered to clean it out. The landlord's too cheap to haul it away and we're too lazy, he joked. I remember thinking how I'd definitely avoid doing laundry at night if I could help it. Saturday was Halloween and we had tickets for the Blazers game that evening. Ryan's roommates were all out at parties, so it was just the 2 of us getting ready. I'd brought this elaborate zombie makeup kit, planning to get into the Halloween spirit even though we were just going to a basketball game. Around 5 in the afternoon, I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom to start working on my face. The bathroom was small but functional. Toilet, sink, shower, tub combo, and that weird laundry chute in the corner. There was a pack of toilet paper sitting on the back of the toilet. You know, one of those multi-packs where they stack like 4 or 5 rolls together in plastic. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I'd been working on my makeup for maybe 20 minutes, leaning close to the mirror to get the details right, when something changed in the room. It's hard to describe, but it was like all the air suddenly got still, like that moment before a thunderstorm when everything goes quiet. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I got this intense butterfly feeling in my stomach. Not excitement, more like anxiety or dread. I froze with the makeup sponge halfway to my face and held my breath. That's when it happened. One of the toilet paper rolls, a full, unopened one, suddenly tipped over from the pack. I watched it in the mirror, completely stunned. There was no draft in the bathroom. The door and window were closed. The AC wasn't running, no fan, nothing that could have caused it to move. The roll hit the floor with a soft thud, and then it started to unravel by itself. I'm not talking about it rolling across the floor because of momentum. I mean it was actively unwinding, like someone was pulling the end of it. The toilet paper streamed across the floor toward the laundry chute, which was about 3 feet away. I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching in the mirror as this toilet paper rolled itself out across the bathroom floor. It moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going. When it reached the laundry chute, the paper slipped through the little door, which I swear was closed before this started, and disappeared down into the basement. The roll kept unwinding, faster now, the white paper streaming down the chute like water. I finally managed to turn around and watch directly instead of through the mirror. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When the roll finally ran out, the cardboard tube sat there for a second, and then, I swear I'm not making this up, it spun in 3 perfect circles before stopping completely. The bathroom felt normal again immediately after, like someone had flipped a switch. The stillness was gone. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking outside and traffic passing on the street. Just like that, everything was back to normal except for the empty cardboard tube sitting by the laundry chute and the toilet paper that had disappeared down it. I must have stood there for 5 full minutes, unable to move. My face was half covered in zombie makeup, and I probably looked ridiculous, but I was genuinely terrified. I kept waiting for something else to happen. Maybe all the cabinet doors would fly open or the lights would flicker, but nothing did. Just as I was working up the courage to leave the bathroom, there was a knock at the door that nearly made me jump out of my skin. "Jess, you almost done in there? We need to leave in like 30 minutes. It was Ryan. My voice came out all shaky when I answered, Yeah, I'll be right out." I quickly splashed some water on my face, washing away the makeup I'd spent so long applying. My hands were trembling. I glanced at the laundry chute one more time before opening the door. Ryan took one look at me, and his face changed. "Whoa, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of his choice of words wasn't lost on me. I felt lightheaded, and apparently looked it too, because Ryan immediately led me to sit down in the hallway. "What happened?" he asked, looking genuinely concerned. I tried to explain what I'd just witnessed, feeling stupider with every word. I mean, it was just toilet paper, right? But the way it had moved on its own with such deliberate motion, it was deeply unsettling. I expected Ryan to laugh or tell me I was being dramatic. Instead, his face went pale. "I was just in the basement," he said quietly. "I went down to grab a clean hoodie from the dryer." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. "What did you see?" I asked, not sure I wanted to hear the answer. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely disturbed. "Toilet paper. It was coming down the chute while I was folding clothes." "But Jess, it wasn't just falling down randomly. It was folding itself, like making perfect zigzags on the floor." My mouth went dry. "What? I thought you were messing around upstairs, like deliberately feeding toilet paper down the chute as a prank or something. I was about to come up and tell you to knock it off when I realized..." He trailed off. Realized what? The paper was folding itself too perfectly, like someone was standing there folding it, but nobody was there. I watched it for maybe 10 seconds before I got spooked and came upstairs. We sat in silence for a moment, both trying to process what had happened. Ryan was the first to speak. "I've lived here for 2 years, and weird stuff has happened before. Things moving slightly, doors opening, but nothing like this." "You believe me, right?" I asked. "I didn't touch that toilet paper. It moved on its own." "I believe you," Ryan said firmly. "I saw what I saw too." We ended up skipping the Blazers game that night. Neither of us felt like going out anymore. Instead, we ordered pizza and watched horror movies in the living room, which in retrospect seems like a weird choice given what had just happened, but somehow fictional horror felt safer than whatever was in that house. Ryan's roommates came home drunk around 2 in the morning, and we didn't bother telling them about the incident. What would we say? "Hey guys, the toilet paper is possessed?" It sounded ridiculous, even though we both knew what we'd seen. That night, I slept on the couch instead of the guest room, which was right next to the bathroom. I kept the TV on low all night, just to have some background noise. I don't think I slept more than an hour total. The next morning, we went down to the basement together. The toilet paper was there on the concrete floor, folded in these perfect zigzag piles, exactly as Ryan had described. It looked almost like decorative tissue paper you'd put in a gift bag, neat, deliberate folds that couldn't possibly have happened by accident. We took pictures, though they don't really show anything spectacular, just folded toilet paper on a basement floor, but we know what we saw. Before I left Portland that Sunday, Ryan and I jokingly named whatever presence was in the house the toilet paper ghost. We tried to rationalize it as some playful spirit pulling a classic Halloween prank, TPing the living instead of the usual trees or houses. I know it sounds trivial compared to other ghost stories. No one was hurt, nothing was broken. It was just toilet paper. But there was something deeply unsettling about watching an inanimate object move with such purpose, such deliberation, like watching a puppet show where you can't see the puppeteer. It's been 8 years, and I still can't explain what happened in that bathroom. Ryan moved out of the house about 6 months later for unrelated reasons, or so he claims, and I've never been back to Portland during Halloween. Sometimes when I'm in a public bathroom and see those stacks of toilet paper, I get a little shiver down my spine. The thing that bothers me the most isn't that it happened, it's that I'll never know why. Was it really just a harmless prank from the other side? Was something trying to communicate, or did we both somehow experience the same hallucination simultaneously? I don't have the answers. All I know is that something moved that toilet paper in the old Portland house that Halloween night, and whatever it was precise enough to fold it into perfect zigzags when it reached the basement floor. Story 10. I still can't sleep properly, even after all these years. Every time I close my eyes, I see that pitch-black figure turning toward us on the beach. I've been wanting to share this for a long time, but never found the courage until now. I grew up in Seacliff, a small coastal town where everyone knows everyone. The beach was our hangout spot. Me, Jake, Mitch, and Sarah. We'd go there day or night just to escape our boring lives. During the day it was all sunbathing and swimming, but at night the beach became this whole other world. The waves would crash in the darkness, and sometimes you'd see bioluminescence in the water like blue sparkles. It was magical. But what happened that Halloween night and a few weeks later changed everything for me. It was Halloween, about 7 years ago. We were 19, old enough to know better, but young enough to still do stupid shit. It was a full moon that night, which made the beach almost as bright as twilight. We were drinking beers, walking along the shore, just shooting the breeze about college plans and local gossip. We'd walked maybe a mile from the main beach access point when Jake stopped suddenly. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, pointing toward the rocks that jutted out from the shoreline. At first I didn't see anything, then my eyes adjusted, and I saw them. About 8 or 9 people in white hooded cloaks, standing in a circle around what looked like some kind of makeshift altar. I'm not talking Halloween costume cloaks either. These were like actual ceremonial robes. They had candles set up, and there was some kind of stone slab in the middle. "Are they filming something?" Sarah whispered. "On Halloween night, in the middle of nowhere?" Mitch replied. "No way." We ducked behind a large piece of driftwood about 50 yards away, close enough to see but far enough that they wouldn't notice us if we stayed quiet. That's when I saw the cat, a black cat that kept trying to wander away from the circle, but one of the cloaked figures would gently pick it up and place it back on the stone. "They're not going to hurt it, are they?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. I felt sick to my stomach. "We should go," I said. "Whatever this is, we shouldn't be watching." We backed away slowly, trying not to make noise. Once we were far enough, we practically ran back to our cars. We didn't talk much on the way home. What could we say? We'd just witnessed what looked like some occult ritual on our beach. The next morning, I woke up to my phone blowing up with texts. There had been a boat crash overnight. A speedboat had hit the rocks near where we'd seen the ritual. 3 people were injured, and one girl, Emma Porter, had died. She'd been in our class at Seacliff High. When we met up later that day, none of us wanted to say it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. The timing was too weird. A ritual on Halloween night under a full moon, and then a fatal accident in almost the exact same spot. It could have been coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. Jake wanted to go to the police, but what would we tell them? That we saw people in cloaks with a cat? It wasn't illegal to wear cloaks or own cats, and we had no proof they were connected to the accident. Plus, we'd been drinking underage, so going to the authorities didn't seem like a great idea. We tried to put it behind us. For a few weeks, we avoided the beach at night, but eventually we convinced ourselves it was just some Halloween weirdos doing their thing, and the boat crash was just terrible timing. So we went back to our nighttime walks. That's when it happened. The thing I still can't explain. It was late November, probably around 11 at night. The four of us were walking along the shoreline, talking about all kinds of random stuff. The conversation somehow turned to supernatural things, and Mitch started telling us about jinns, these demonic spirits from Middle Eastern mythology that can supposedly take physical form. They're like living shadows, he was saying. They watch humans and can mimic us, but they're not really solid, more like smoke given shape. Bullshit, Jake said. You've been watching too many horror movies. That's when I saw it. About 30 yards ahead of us, something dark was standing at the edge of the water. At first, I thought it was just a piece of driftwood or maybe a trash bag blown by the wind. But as we got closer, I realized it was moving in a way that didn't make sense with the breeze. "Guys," I said, my voice barely audible over the waves. "What's that up ahead?" They all squinted into the darkness. The beach that night wasn't well lit. No full moon this time, just a sliver of crescent and the distant lights from houses up on the cliffs. "I don't see anything," Sarah said. "There," I pointed, right by the water's edge, something standing there. As we got closer, maybe 20 yards away now, Jake suddenly grabbed my arm. "I see it," he whispered. One by one, they all saw it, a figure, completely black, not just dark clothing, but utterly devoid of light, like a hole cut into reality. It was roughly human-shaped, about my height, but there was something off about its proportions. Its arms seemed too long, hanging down past where knees should be. We slowed our pace, but kept walking. I don't know why we didn't turn around right then. Maybe it was disbelief or morbid curiosity. At 12 feet away, we all stopped. The thing hadn't moved. It was just standing there, facing the ocean. And then, as if sensing us, what I can only describe as its head slowly turned toward us. That's when true terror hit me, because despite being close enough to make out facial features on a normal person, there was nothing to see. No eyes, no mouth, no features at all. Just absolute blackness, darker than the night around it. It wasn't like looking at someone wearing a black morph suit or dark clothing. It was like looking at a tear in reality, a perfect silhouette cut from the night itself. I was so scared I did something stupid. I pretended to be frightened as if I wasn't actually terrified already, and yelled, "Oh shit!" and started running back the way we came. I thought maybe if I acted like I was joking around, it would somehow make the situation less real. But my fake panic triggered real panic in my friends. They all started running too, and suddenly we were all sprinting across the sand, our feet pounding in terror. Sarah looked back, something I didn't have the courage to do, and screamed, "It's following us." I'll never forget the sound of her voice, pure primal fear. We ran faster than I've ever run in my life, not stopping until we reached the parking lot where we'd left our cars. We piled into Jake's car, locking the doors and breathing hard. "Did anyone else see that?" Mitch asked, his voice shaking. "Tell me you all saw that." We had all seen it, a figure with no features, no reflection of light, no detail whatsoever, just pure darkness in the shape of a person. And according to Sarah, it had followed us. "What the fuck was that?" Jake kept repeating. "What the actual fuck was that?" "Maybe it was someone messing with us," I suggested, desperately wanting a rational explanation, like wearing all black to scare people. "Marcus, that wasn't a person," Sarah said firmly. "Did you see any features, any at all? It was 12 feet away from us, and I couldn't see a face, clothes, nothing. Just black." "Could have been some drugged-out homeless person," Mitch offered, but his voice lacked conviction. We argued about it all the way home. Jake and Sarah were convinced we'd seen something supernatural, maybe even one of those jinn things Mitch had been talking about, which felt too coincidental to ignore. Mitch and I tried to find logical explanations, but deep down, I knew there was nothing logical about what we'd seen. We never went back to that beach at night. Not together anyway. Our friend group kind of fell apart after that. Jake and Sarah became obsessed with researching the paranormal, trying to find similar encounters. Mitch moved away for college a few months later. I stayed in Seacliff but found excuses to avoid the beach after dark. Sometimes I drive by at night and look out at the shoreline from the safety of my car. I've never seen the figure again, but I always feel like it's there, waiting, watching. I've tried to convince myself it was just shadows playing tricks on our eyes, or maybe someone trying to scare us. But then I remember how it moved. Not like a person in dark clothing, but like darkness itself given form. How its head turned toward us with no visible features. How it followed us when we ran. And I think about that Halloween ritual and Emma's death the next day. Were they connected? Was what we saw on the beach somehow linked to those people in white cloaks? I don't know. All I know is that something was on that beach that night. Something that shouldn't exist in our world. And sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I imagine it's still there, standing at the edge of the water, waiting for someone else to walk by. I haven't told this story to many people. Most would think I'm crazy or that we were all on drugs or something. We weren't. I know what I saw, what we all saw. So if you're ever in Seacliff, stick to the beach during daylight hours. And if you do go at night and see something that looks like a black silhouette standing by the water's edge, run. Don't look back, just run. Story 11. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened last month. I've always been skeptical of paranormal stuff, but I can't explain what my neighbor and I both saw. I've been losing sleep over it, and I figured writing it down might help. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in San Antonio. It's the kind of place where everyone has a lawn. Most people keep to themselves, but we all wave when we see each other getting the mail. Nothing exciting ever happens here, or at least that's what I thought. It started when I found this stray cat dead in my backyard. Poor thing had been torn up pretty bad by some dogs that sometimes roam around at night. I'd seen this cat around the neighborhood before. It was a scruffy orange tabby that my neighbor Mrs. Ramirez would feed sometimes. I couldn't just leave it there, so I decided to bury it in the far corner of my yard under this old oak tree. It was around 7 in the evening and the sun was just starting to set. I dug a small hole, wrapped the cat in an old towel and buried it. Nothing fancy, but it felt like the right thing to do. I even said a little something over the grave, feeling kind of silly talking to a dead cat, but whatever. I'm not religious or anything, but it just seemed respectful. That same night I was taking out the trash when I noticed this guy on a bicycle riding slowly through the alley behind our houses. Normally I wouldn't think twice about it, but something felt off. He was going really slow, like he was looking for something, and he kept circling back. I saw him pass by at least 3 times. He was wearing a dark hoodie, despite it being pretty warm out, and I couldn't see his face. I figured maybe he was casing houses or something, so I went back inside and made sure my doors were locked. The next day, I noticed the same guy cycling through the alley again, around the same time. This went on for a few days, and I was getting pretty paranoid. I considered calling the cops, but what would I say? There's a guy riding a bike in a public alley. They'd laugh at me. Then came the morning that changed everything. I work at this warehouse across town, and my shift starts at 5 in the morning, so I usually leave the house around 4. It was a Thursday, and I remember it was unusually cold that morning. There was this heavy fog hanging over everything, the kind that makes the streetlights look like they're floating in clouds. I was driving down my usual route, about to turn onto the main road, when I had to stop at a 4-way intersection. As I slowed down, I noticed someone standing on the corner. At first I thought it was just someone waiting for a bus or something, but as I got closer, I realized it was weird. It was a figure in what looked like a black robe or cloak, the kind of thing that covers you from head to toe. The really disturbing part was that where the face should be, there was just nothing. Like, not even darkness or a shadow, just a void. I couldn't make out any features at all. It wasn't like the figure was wearing a mask or had its hood pulled forward. There was simply no face there. I sat at the stop sign for way too long, just staring. The figure didn't move. It didn't seem to be looking at me, but I couldn't really tell since it had no eyes. Eventually, a car honked behind me, and I snapped out of it. I drove through the intersection, checking my rearview mirror, but the figure just stood there, motionless. I tried to convince myself it was just someone in a costume or maybe a trick of the light and fog. I went to work, did my shift, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. My co-workers noticed I was distracted and kept asking if I was okay. I just told them I hadn't slept well. When I got home that afternoon, I was collecting my mail when I saw my neighbor Mike getting his mail too. Mike's an older guy, retired military, lives alone in the house next to mine. We usually just exchange pleasantries, but that day he looked as shaken as I felt. "You okay, Mike?" I asked. He looked at me for a second like he was deciding whether to talk, then said, "Lucas, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I saw something really strange this morning." My stomach dropped. At the four-way stop on Cedar and Oak, around 4 in the morning, his eyes widened. "You saw it too, the figure in the black robe?" I nodded, feeling both relieved and terrified at the same time. Relieved because I wasn't going crazy, but terrified because that meant whatever I saw was real. Mike invited me over to his garage, where he has a little workshop set up. He offered me a beer, and we sat on these old folding chairs. He told me what happened to him, and honestly, his experience was way more intense than mine. He said he'd gotten up early to work on this cabinet he was building. Around 3:30 in the morning, he opened his garage door to get some fresh air while he worked. That's when he saw it. The same black-robed figure I'd seen standing on the sidewalk in front of his house. Like me, he noticed the lack of a face, just this empty void where features should be. The figure wasn't looking toward the houses. It was facing the street. Mike said he froze, not sure what to do. He grabbed an axe he keeps in his workshop just in case, and stood watching. He said he felt like he couldn't look away, like he was hypnotized or something. Then things got even weirder. Another identical figure appeared. Just appeared, Mike emphasized, not walked up or anything. 1 second there was one, then there were two, standing side by side. They were both in the same black robes, with the same featureless non-faces. Mike said the two figures then started walking back and forth on the sidewalk in perfect sync with each other. They would walk about 20 feet in one direction, then turn around and walk back over and over. He said it was like watching a patrol or some kind of ritual. "I watched them for an hour, Lucas," he told me, his voice shaking a little. "A full hour. They never stopped, never spoke, never acknowledged each other or me, just back and forth, back and forth." As the sun started to rise, Mike finally closed his garage door and locked himself in his house. He said he watched through the windows, but as the sky lightened, the figures just weren't there anymore. They didn't walk away or disappear in a flash. They were simply gone. Neither of us had any explanation. Mike asked if I'd buried something recently, which struck me as an odd question until I remembered the cat. When I told him about it, he got this look on his face, like something had clicked. "My grandmother was Mexican," he said. "She believed in all sorts of things. She used to say that burying animals can sometimes open doors that should stay closed, especially if they died violently. I'm not superstitious, but a chill ran down my spine when he said that. Could burying that cat somehow have triggered this? It seemed ridiculous, but then again, so did faceless figures in robes. We talked for hours, trying to make sense of it all. Mike suggested maybe they were some kind of death omens or spirits. I wondered if they could be hallucinations caused by carbon monoxide or something, but that wouldn't explain both of us seeing the same thing at different times and places. We even drove to the intersection where I'd seen the figure, but there was nothing unusual there. Just a normal street corner in a normal neighborhood. That night, I barely slept. I kept getting up to look out my windows, half expecting to see those figures standing in my yard. I didn't see anything, but every shadow, every rustle of leaves made me jump. The next few days, Mike and I kept checking in with each other. We both watched the alley, but the cyclist never returned either. It was like whatever weirdness had entered our lives had suddenly decided to leave. It's been about a month now, and we haven't seen the robed figures again. I did some research online, looking for similar experiences, but found nothing exactly like ours. There were stories about shadow people and men in black, but nothing about faceless figures in robes walking in sync. I've tried to go back to normal, but I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there somewhere. Every time I drive through that intersection on my way to work, I slow down and look at that corner. Every time I take out the trash at night, I find myself scanning the alley for that cyclist. Mike suggested we dig up the cat and rebury it somewhere else with some kind of blessing, but I don't know if I believe that would do anything. Plus, the thought of digging up a decomposing cat is pretty gross. So here I am, still wondering what the hell we saw. Were they ghosts, aliens, interdimensional travelers? Just a couple of weirdos playing a prank? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. What keeps me up at night isn't just the memory of those featureless voids where faces should be. It's the question of why. Why were they here? Why were they pacing like that? Were they waiting for something, for someone? And most disturbing of all, what would have happened if Mike or I had tried to approach them? Sometimes I dream about them now. In my dreams, they're always pacing back and forth, and sometimes in the worst dreams, they stop their pacing, turn their featureless non-faces toward me, and begin walking in my direction. I've thought about moving, but would that even help? Whatever these things were, they found us once. Who's to say they couldn't find us again? All I know is that every night now, I double-check my locks, and every morning, when I leave for work, I take a different route to avoid that intersection. Mike does the same. We don't talk about it much anymore, but I know he's as haunted by it as I am. If anyone has experienced anything similar, or has any idea what we might have seen, I'd appreciate hearing about it. Because right now, all I have are questions with no answers, and a lingering fear that someday those faceless figures might return. Story 12. I still can't explain what happened in my dad's house. I've tried to rationalize it for years, but I'm finally sharing this because I need to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. I'm 26 now, but this all started when I was about 10. My dad raised me alone since I was 6. My mom left and was never really in the picture after that. Dad was a Desert Storm veteran, served in Kuwait back in the early 90s. He wasn't the type to talk much about his service, and he definitely wasn't superstitious or into any weird spiritual stuff. Just a regular, practical guy who worked hard and took care of me. But there was always something off about his bedroom. Ever since I was little, I felt this, I don't know how to describe it, this overwhelming uneasiness whenever I was in there. It was worst when my back was to the door. My hair would stand up on my arms and neck, and I'd get this desperate urge to just get out. I never told my dad because it seemed stupid. It was just a normal bedroom with nothing special about it. What I didn't know until later was that my dad kept several boxes of stuff from his time in the military stored in his closet. One box in particular contained things he'd collected in Kuwait, an old gas mask he said he took from a POW, some Arabic writing on parchment, coins, a small rug, and other random items. Nothing that should have been creepy, just war memorabilia. When I was 15, we moved to a different house across town. Dad got a better job, and we needed more space as I was getting older. That's when things got worse. The first week in the new place, I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of cupboards opening and closing in the kitchen. I figured it was Dad getting a midnight snack, but when I went to check, the kitchen was empty. I went to his room and he was sound asleep. I chalked it up to the house settling or something, but it happened almost every night that week. Then there were the sounds from the closets, rustling, like someone shifting through clothes or boxes. One time I was home alone after school, and I swear to God, my dad's bedroom door, which had been closed, just opened by itself. Not dramatically like in a movie. It just slowly swung open about halfway. I nearly shit myself and ran outside to wait for my dad to get home from work. When I told him, he just shrugged it off, said it was probably air pressure from the vents or something. But I noticed he seemed a little uncomfortable, like maybe he'd experienced something too, but didn't want to admit it. We lived in that house for about 2 years before moving again to a condo. Strangely, the weird stuff stopped completely for almost a year. I actually started to feel normal, thinking maybe it had all been in my head or just quirks of the old house. But then we started packing to move to a bigger place, and that's when I found it. I was helping Dad pack up his closet, and there was this comic book-sized box I'd never seen before. It was wooden with metal corners, kind of like a small treasure chest. The moment I picked it up, I felt sick to my stomach, like physically ill. That feeling you get right before you throw up, combined with absolute dread. I opened it, stupid I know, and inside were all these Desert Storm items, the gas mask I mentioned, which looked old and worn with cracked eye lenses, some sand in a small vial, a few pieces of paper with Arabic writing, and a small metal object that looked like a pendant or charm with strange symbols on it. Dad walked in and saw me with the box. He wasn't mad, but he quickly took it from me and said, "I'll pack this one myself." I remember him wrapping it in one of his old t-shirts before putting it in a moving box. Our third house was a 2-story place with more rooms. Dad put the box in the guest bedroom closet. The weird thing was, I finally felt comfortable in Dad's room. That creepy feeling was gone, but now the guest room made me feel sick. I avoided it completely, making excuses not to go in there. One night, about 3 months after moving in, I was up late playing video games when I heard what sounded like throat singing coming from downstairs. If you've never heard throat singing, it's this deep, resonant humming that sounds like multiple tones at once. It was fucking terrifying at 2 in the morning when I knew everyone should be asleep. I thought maybe Dad had fallen asleep with the TV on, but when I checked he was asleep and the TV was off. The sound seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It stopped after about 5 minutes. After that, things escalated. Footsteps on the stairs when no one was there. Cold spots throughout the house, and I mean cold, like walking into a freezer suddenly, even in summer. The bathroom light would be on when I got up in the morning, even though Dad swore he hadn't used it during the night. My girlfriend at the time experienced it too. She was staying over one night. Dad was cool with it as long as we were responsible, and she got up to use the bathroom. When she tried to come back into my room, she couldn't open the door. She said she turned the knob completely, but it felt like someone was holding it from the other side. She knocked, which woke me up, and when I opened it, she was white as a sheet. I hadn't been holding the door. I'd been sound asleep. We lived in that house for about 3 years before Dad decided to downsize again. I was 19 by then and planning to move out for college soon, but I still helped with the move. The guest room was the last one we packed up, and I remember feeling relieved when Dad took that wooden box and loaded it into the moving truck himself. Our fourth and current house is where things got really fucked up. It's a single-story, 3-bedroom place. Dad put the box in the guest room again, and within a week, both my girlfriend, same one from before, and I started seeing shadow figures. Not just glimpses out of the corner of our eyes, but distinct human-shaped shadows that would dart around the guest room doorway. Dad never saw them, or if he did, he never mentioned it. One night, I got up to use the bathroom, which was across the hall from the guest room. As I was washing my hands, I glanced into the hallway and saw a small shadow peeking out from the guest room door frame at about a 45-degree angle, like someone leaning their head out to look at me. I froze, and the shadow slowly retreated back into the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stood there for what felt like forever, before gathering the courage to walk past the guest room to get back to my bedroom. When I passed by, I looked in, and the shadow was there again, but this time, it was about 6 feet tall, half emerging from the doorway. I ran to my room and locked the door. The next morning I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination or a trick of the light, but a few nights later my girlfriend came over and said she saw lights on in the guest room and the door half open, even though no one had been in there for weeks. The bathroom lights started turning on by themselves regularly. I'd wake up at night to use the bathroom and the light would already be on, even though I knew I'd turned it off before bed. Sometimes I'd hear scratching sounds from inside the walls, like something trying to get out. I started feeling unwelcome in my own home. It was like whatever was attached to my dad's war souvenirs was getting more aggressive, more territorial. One night I finally broke down and told my dad everything. All the weird shit I'd been experiencing for years. I expected him to laugh it off or tell me I was being ridiculous, but he got really quiet. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. He said the gas mask in the box had belonged to an Iraqi soldier who had been found dead in a bunker. Dad's unit had cleared the bunker, and he'd taken the mask as a souvenir, something soldiers apparently did back then, even though they weren't supposed to. He said he'd always felt a little guilty about it, but never thought much of it until we started experiencing strange things. The next day, Dad took the box and drove away with it. He wouldn't tell me what he was going to do with it, just said he was taking care of it. When he came back hours later, he looked exhausted, but relieved. The weird activity stopped completely after that. No more shadows, no more lights turning on, no more strange sounds. It was like whatever had been haunting us was gone. I moved out for college a few months later, but I still visit Dad regularly. We never talk about what happened, but sometimes I catch him looking at the guest room with this troubled expression, like he's waiting for something to start up again. I don't know what was attached to that box or those items. I don't know if it was some kind of curse or if the original owner's spirit somehow followed his possessions home. All I know is that for almost 15 years, something from my dad's war followed us from house to house, making its presence known and growing stronger with each move. I still get chills thinking about that tall shadow half emerging from the doorway. What would have happened if I'd stayed there longer? Would it have fully emerged? Would I have seen its face? Some questions are better left unanswered. Story 13. I've been debating whether to share this for years. I guess it's finally time to get it off my chest, since I still think about it almost daily, even though it's been over 20 years now. My husband Daniel and I got married in the spring of 2000 and moved into our first apartment together in Somerville, South Carolina. We were so excited, our own place, just starting our lives together. The apartment wasn't anything special, just a simple 2-bedroom in an older building on the edge of town, but it was ours. The rent was surprisingly affordable, which we thought was just good luck at the time. About a month after moving in, we decided to adopt some cats from the local shelter. We fell in love with 2 of them, Milo, an orange tabby who was super affectionate, and Shadow, a black cat who was more independent but still loving in his own way. The first few weeks were completely normal. We were settling in, arranging furniture, hanging pictures, all that newlywed stuff. We kept the cats in the spare bedroom at night with their litter box and food because they were still adjusting and would sometimes get rowdy while we were trying to sleep. That's when the weird stuff started happening. It began with this tapping sound. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, like someone tapping a fingernail against metal. The first time we heard it, I nudged Daniel awake, thinking maybe one of the cats had gotten out and was messing with something in the kitchen. He checked, but both cats were in their room, curled up asleep. We figured it was just the pipes or the heating system making noise. Old building, you know? But the tapping continued every night, always starting around 3 in the morning, always from the cat's room, always the same pattern. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. We checked everything, the windows, the vents, the closet, under the bed. Nothing explained it. Then one night, about 2 months after moving in, we were in bed when we heard the most horrific crash from the kitchen. It sounded like every dish we owned had been thrown onto the floor. Daniel jumped up, grabbing his baseball bat from beside the bed. We'd already started keeping it there because of the tapping, and we rushed to the kitchen. Nothing, not a single dish out of place. The cats were still in their room, now awake and alert, but clearly they hadn't caused the noise. We checked the entire apartment, closets, under furniture, behind doors. Nothing was disturbed anywhere. I remember Daniel saying, maybe it was the neighbors, but we both knew it wasn't. The sound had come from inside our kitchen, not through a wall. We barely slept that night, and I started wondering if maybe there was something wrong with the apartment. The worst incident with the cats happened about a week later. Daniel and I were sitting on the couch watching TV one evening. Both cats were in the living room with us. Milo was curled up on my lap, and Shadow was playing with a toy by the window. Suddenly they both froze, and I don't mean they just stopped moving. Their entire bodies went rigid, like statues. Their heads turned in perfect unison toward the corner of the room beneath the window. I remember whispering to Daniel, "What are they looking at?" He shrugged and we both stared at the empty corner. There was nothing there, no bug, no shadow, nothing unusual at all. But the cats wouldn't stop staring. Their tails were slightly puffed, and neither of them blinked or moved a muscle. Daniel got up and snapped his fingers near Milo's ears. Nothing. The cat didn't even twitch. I picked up Shadow from the floor and his body remained completely stiff in my hands, his head still twisted toward that corner. It was like holding a stuffed animal, not a living creature. His eyes didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring. Daniel, getting frustrated or scared, probably both, walked over to the corner and actually kicked through the air like he was trying to disperse whatever invisible thing might be there. The moment he did, both cats suddenly relaxed. Shadow squirmed out of my hands and Milo stretched and yawned like he'd just woken up from a nap. They both wandered off to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. We were thoroughly freaked out but tried to rationalize it. Maybe they saw a reflection or heard a high-pitched noise we couldn't detect. But deep down, we knew something wasn't right. The bedroom issues started about a month later. I began feeling uncomfortable in our bedroom at night. It wasn't anything I could explain, just this overwhelming feeling of being watched, of something oppressive in the air. I started having trouble sleeping, but I didn't tell Daniel because I thought I was just being paranoid. Then one night, he suggested we sleep on the couch. When I asked why, he just said, "I don't know, I just don't want to sleep in there tonight." That's when I realized he was feeling it too. We started taking turns sleeping on the couch, making excuses to each other about backaches or wanting to watch late-night TV. Neither of us admitted the real reason until much later. One night when I was in bed alone, Daniel had claimed the couch. I was trying to fall asleep but felt that same heaviness in the room. I closed my eyes, trying to relax, and that's when I saw it. With my eyes closed, I could see a dark figure standing at the foot of our bed. It was short, maybe 4 feet tall, with a vaguely humanoid shape but completely black. I couldn't make out any features, just this solid, dark mass. I thought I was dreaming, so I opened my eyes. The figure disappeared, closed them again. It was back. I did this several times, heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The figure was only visible when my eyes were closed, like it was projecting itself directly into my mind. I was terrified but somehow managed not to scream. I just lay there, eyes wide open until morning came. I didn't tell Daniel. I convinced myself it was just a weird half-dream. A few weeks later, Daniel and I were both homesick from work with a stomach bug. We were miserable, taking turns in the bathroom and trying to keep down sips of ginger ale. At one point, we were both lying in the living room, and Daniel mumbled something about not wanting to go back to the bedroom even to get medicine. I asked him why, and after some hesitation, he told me. He described seeing a dark figure at the foot of our bed whenever he closed his eyes at night. He described it exactly as I had seen it, short, humanoid, completely black. He thought he was having fever dreams or hallucinations from being sick. I felt cold all over when he described it because I knew then it wasn't just in my head. We'd both seen the same thing, independently, without ever discussing it. We finally admitted to each other why we'd been avoiding the bedroom. The feeling in there had gotten so bad that sometimes we'd both sleep on the floor in the living room rather than spend another night in that room. Another strange thing was Milo's behavior. Whenever one of us would get up to use the bathroom at night, Milo would race ahead of us and wait by the bathroom door. He'd stay there the entire time, then meow loudly until we escorted him back to the living room. It was like he was protecting us, making sure we got safely through the dark hallway. Shadow never did this. He'd stay curled up wherever he was sleeping. We lived with all this for almost a year, never really talking about it to anyone else because, honestly, who would believe us? We convinced ourselves we were overreacting or that there must be some logical explanation. Then one night in early 2001, we were watching TV, and this documentary about Native American folklore came on. They were discussing various spirits and entities believed to exist in different tribal traditions. When they started describing one particular entity, a small dark figure that was said to appear in homes and cause distress, Daniel and I looked at each other in shock. They called it something I can't remember now, but the description matched exactly what we'd both been seeing. The documentary said this entity wasn't necessarily evil, but was mischievous and drawn to certain types of energy. It was known for making noises, moving objects, and appearing to people in a state between wakefulness and sleep. That was the final straw for us. We broke our lease the following month and moved to an apartment on the other side of town. We never told the landlord why, just made up some excuse about wanting to be closer to work. The most convincing proof that something real had been happening came after we moved. Milo, who had been our faithful bathroom escort for months, completely stopped the behavior the very first night in the new apartment. He never again felt the need to accompany us through hallways or wait outside doors. Whatever he had been protecting us from was gone. We've moved several times since then, even left South Carolina altogether a few years ago, and nothing like that has ever happened again. But to this day, I sometimes wake up at 3 in the morning and listen for that tapping sound. Sometimes I close my eyes, terrified that I might see that figure standing there again. Daniel and I rarely talk about it anymore. What's the point? We experienced it, we know what happened, and nobody else would understand unless they'd been through something similar. But sometimes I wonder about the people who moved into that apartment after us, and if they ever hear tapping in the night, or if their pets ever freeze, staring at an empty corner beneath the window. Story 14. I've been holding this in for too long, and I need to tell someone who might believe me. This happened during my sophomore year of college, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. I joined Alpha Phi Omega, not the real name, at Central State University in this small town in Georgia. Our sorority house was this massive old Southern plantation-style building about 2 blocks from campus, the kind with huge white pillars and a wraparound porch that looks straight out of Gone with the Wind. It was beautiful during the day, but at night, those white pillars cast the creepiest shadows. I never actually lived in the house. I had an apartment with my high school friend Jessica, but I spent almost every waking hour there between chapter meetings, study sessions, and just hanging out with my sisters. The first time I stepped foot in that house, something felt off. The tour started normal enough. The first floor was gorgeous, hardwood floors, antique furniture, lots of natural light. The living room had these beautiful bay windows, and portraits of past sorority presidents lined the walls. The kitchen had been modernized but still had this vintage charm with the original tile flooring. But the second I set foot on the second floor, the atmosphere changed completely. The air felt heavy and cold, even though it was the middle of August in Georgia. My skin broke out in goosebumps, and I felt this weight pressing down on my chest. No one else seemed to notice, so I tried to shake it off. The tour guide, Bethany, showed us the bedrooms where some of the sisters lived. At the very end of the hallway was this guest room that nobody used much. It was right next to the entrance to the attic, and Bethany mentioned casually that most girls avoided sleeping there. Why? I asked. Oh, just drafty. Old houses, you know, she said, but she wouldn't make eye contact with me. When we went up to the attic, that's when I knew something was seriously wrong with this place. The attic spanned the entire length of the house, but was divided into smaller sections by walls covered in this bizarre cardboard that had writing all over it. Not like graffiti, but neat handwriting that was too faded to read. The attic felt disconnected from the rest of the house, like stepping into a different dimension. The floorboards creaked with every step, and there was this smell I can't even describe. Not like mold or dust, but something else entirely. Despite all the red flags, I was desperate to fit in, so I joined the sorority. The first few weeks were fine. Normal college stuff, making friends, learning our sorority history. Then, about 2 months in, the weird stuff started happening. It was mid-October, and most of the sisters who lived in the house had gone home for fall break. My roommate Jessica was visiting her boyfriend at Georgia Tech, so I decided to hang out at the house with Shannon, the only sister who'd stayed behind. We were having a wine night, watching some stupid reality show in the living room when we heard it. A loud thud from upstairs, then another. Shannon paused the TV. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my heart already racing. Then we heard something even worse, the sound of metal dragging across the floor, followed by footsteps approaching the staircase. "Is someone else here?" I whispered. Shannon shook her head. "Everyone's gone for break." We sat frozen for a moment before Shannon grabbed a fireplace poker, and we slowly made our way to the staircase. Nothing. No one was there. We checked every bedroom upstairs, empty. When we got to the kitchen, we found 2 metal baking sheets on the floor, a good 10 feet from the cupboard where they were stored. "Maybe they just fell," I suggested, but we both knew that didn't explain how they'd moved across the floor or the footsteps we'd heard. Shannon returned the sheets to the cupboard, her hands shaking. "This kind of thing happens sometimes," she admitted. "The older sisters talk about it, but they don't like to freak out the new girls." That should have been enough to keep me away, but like an idiot, I kept coming back. Fast forward to December. We were having a pre-finals sleepover at the house. There weren't enough beds for everyone, so I volunteered to sleep in the guest room, the one next to the attic. Everyone exchanged looks when I offered, but no one said anything. I went to bed around 2 in the morning, exhausted from studying. I was almost asleep when I felt something tugging at my blanket from the foot of the bed. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then it happened again, a distinct pull. I sat up and turned on the lamp, but there was no one there. The door was still closed, the windows locked. I convinced myself it was just my imagination and somehow managed to fall asleep. Around 4 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the attic stairs. They were slow and deliberate, the old wood creaking under the weight. I lay there, completely paralyzed with fear, as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Then I heard the attic doorknob turning, back and forth, back and forth. I could see it from where I was lying. The knob was moving on its own, and the door was shaking in its frame. But the chain guard was still in place, preventing it from opening completely. I wanted to scream but couldn't make a sound. I just lay there, watching that doorknob turn for what felt like an eternity, until it finally stopped. The footsteps retreated back up the stairs, and I didn't move a muscle until the sun came up. At breakfast the next morning, Mackenzie, who had been sleeping in the room across the hall, looked absolutely wrecked. When I asked if she was okay, she broke down crying. "I had this horrible nightmare," she whispered. "There was this man. He was trying to get me to come into the attic. He kept saying he had something to show me, but his eyes were all wrong. They were completely black, and I knew if I went with him, I would never come back." We stared at each other, and I felt sick to my stomach. I hadn't told anyone about what happened with the attic door. After that incident, Shannon finally showed me the book, a leather-bound journal that the sorority had been keeping for over 25 years, documenting all the strange occurrences in the house. The entries were chilling. April 1998. Saw a woman's figure in the bathroom mirror. When I turned around, no one was there. November 2003. Woke up to the sound of people having a conversation in the hallway at 3 a.m. When I opened my door to tell them to be quiet, the hallway was empty. February 2010. My hairbrush disappeared from my room for 3 days. Found it sitting on the attic stairs. No one admits to putting it there. May 2016. All the pots and pans were rearranged in the kitchen overnight. The house was locked, alarm set. There were dozens more entries, spanning back to when our chapter first moved into the house in the 1990s. The most disturbing part was how similar many of the experiences were. The same footsteps, the same cold spots, the same feeling of being watched, especially in that guest room and near the attic. I didn't want to believe it, but then I had my final experience in that house, and it's the one that still haunts me the most. It was just after finals in December. Most people had gone home for winter break, but I was staying an extra day to help clean up after our end-of-semester party. I was alone in the house, packing up decorations in the living room, when all the lights went out. It wasn't storming, and when I checked my phone, I had full power and service. I used my phone flashlight to find the circuit breaker in the basement, but when I got there, all the switches were in the correct position. As I was examining them, I heard the distinct sound of the attic door opening upstairs. I froze, listening. Slow, heavy footsteps crossed the ceiling above me, moving from the attic toward the staircase. Then they started descending, one deliberate step at a time. I was trapped in the basement with whatever was coming down those stairs. My phone flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into complete darkness. I pressed myself against the wall, praying that whatever it was wouldn't find me. The footsteps reached the first floor and paused. Then, to my horror, I heard the basement door open. Footsteps on the basement stairs now, coming closer. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the temperature dropping rapidly. My breath came out in visible puffs in the darkness. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt a presence so strongly it was like being hit by a wave. Then directly in my ear, a voice whispered, "You don't belong here." I ran. I don't even remember how I got past whatever was there or how I made it up the stairs and out of the house. I just remember running until I reached my apartment, locking the door behind me and sitting with all the lights on until Jessica came home the next day. I never went back to that house alone. I stayed in the sorority, but I made excuses whenever we had events there. The following year, after multiple sisters reported similar experiences, our chapter finally decided to abandon the house altogether. We moved to a newer building closer to campus, and as far as I know, that old house is still sitting there empty. Sometimes I drive by it when I visit campus for alumni events, and it looks exactly the same, beautiful and imposing in the daylight. But I won't go near it after dark, and I still wake up sometimes hearing that voice in my ear telling me I don't belong. I've tried researching the history of the house, looking for explanations about who might have died there or what happened on that land, but the records are spotty. All I know is that whatever was in that house wasn't just my imagination. 25 years of documented experiences by rational, educated women can't all be hallucinations or coincidences. I don't know what to make of it all, and I'm not sure I ever will. Story 15. I've never been the type to believe in paranormal stuff. Growing up in Whispering Pines, there wasn't much to do except work on farms and mind your own business. Our little rural community was quiet, too quiet sometimes. My name's Connor, and what I'm about to share still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. It all started 5 years ago when I was 17. My mom had recently broken up with this guy named Rick, who was into music. When they split, he left some of his stuff at our place, including this old acoustic guitar. Nothing fancy, just a worn-down thing with a few nicks and scratches. Mom told me I could have it since Rick never came back for his things, and I figured why not learn to play? Could be a good way to kill time in a place where the internet cuts out half the time. For weeks, that guitar just sat in the corner of my bedroom. I'd pick it up occasionally, try to learn some chords from YouTube tutorials when our connection was decent, but mostly it collected dust. I wasn't exactly a natural. The guitar would just lean there against the wall next to my dresser, this quiet presence in my room that I barely noticed anymore. Until that Tuesday, I was doing homework on my bed when the guitar fell over. Just like that. No windows open, no drafts, nobody else in the room. It wasn't placed at a weird angle or anything. It had been sitting stable in that same spot for nearly a month. The sound made me jump so bad I knocked my textbook to the floor. When I looked over, the guitar was just lying there on its side, like someone had pushed it. That's weird, I thought. But I chalked it up to, I don't know, the house settling or something. I picked it up, made sure it was stable against the wall, and went back to my homework. But I kept glancing at it for the rest of the night. The real freaky stuff happened 3 days later. I was having breakfast in the kitchen, just cereal and orange juice. My grandparents lived with us back then, and Grandpa was out running errands that morning. Grandma had just gone to use the bathroom down the hall. The house was dead quiet except for my spoon clinking against the bowl. Then I heard it, clear as day. The sound of guitar strings being strummed, not just one string plucked, but a full strum across all of them, like someone had dragged their hand across the strings in one smooth motion. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. The sound came from my bedroom, which was down the hall past the bathroom. I knew exactly what it was. That distinctive metallic ring of guitar strings can't be mistaken for anything else. Before I could even process what was happening, Grandma came rushing into the kitchen, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. That's when I felt the first real chill. It wasn't just me, she'd heard it too. "The guitar?" I managed to ask. She nodded, and we just stared at each other for a second. My cereal got soggy in front of me, forgotten. "Maybe it fell again," I said, even though I knew that wasn't it. A falling guitar doesn't strum itself. We both walked to my bedroom, not too quickly, not too slowly, like we were trying to act normal, even though this was anything but. The door was open just how I'd left it that morning. The guitar was leaning against the wall, exactly where it had been when I went to breakfast. Grandma stood in the doorway while I checked around the room. Nothing was disturbed, no windows open, no fans running, nothing that could explain what we'd heard. "Maybe it was the TV," Grandma suggested, but we both knew the TV wasn't on. I touched the guitar strings lightly. They were still, but as my fingers brushed them, I felt this weird sensation, like the guitar was somehow warm, even though it had been sitting in a cool room all morning. That was it for me. I called Rick that afternoon and told him I had his guitar and wanted to return it. He seemed surprised I still had it, but agreed to meet me at a gas station halfway between our houses the next day. When I handed the guitar back to him, I almost asked if he'd ever experienced anything strange with it, but I stopped myself. I didn't want him to think I was crazy, and honestly, I didn't want to know. All I felt was relief when that guitar was out of my hands and loaded into his truck. Life went back to normal after that. No more inexplicable sounds, no more objects falling for no reason. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, or that there must have been some logical explanation I just hadn't figured out. Then 2 years later, something happened that I still can't explain. I was in my room late one night scrolling through my phone. My parents and grandparents were asleep and the house was quiet. It was around 2 in the morning. I've always been a night owl. Nothing unusual was happening. I was just lying in bed, the soft glow of my phone the only light in the room. Then it hit me, this overwhelming sense of dread that came out of absolutely nowhere. One second I was fine, reading some article online, and the next I was gripped by the most intense fear I've ever felt. It wasn't like being startled or getting scared by a horror movie. This was deeper, more primal. I felt like I was being watched. No, more than watched. Like something was in my room with me, standing right beside my bed, staring down at me. The feeling was so powerful that I couldn't move. My thumb froze over my phone screen and my breathing got shallow and quick. The rational part of my brain was screaming that I was alone, that there was nothing there, but every instinct in my body was telling me to run. I couldn't even bring myself to look around the room. I was terrified of what I might see if I moved my eyes from my phone. The feeling kept intensifying until I was practically paralyzed with fear. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it, and my palms were sweating so much I almost dropped my phone. I've never felt anything like it before or since. This certainty that something malevolent was right there with me, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen in fear. It could have been minutes or just seconds. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Eventually, I managed to gather enough courage to quickly reach over and turn on my bedside lamp. The light flooded the room, and of course, there was nothing there. Just my familiar furniture, my clothes draped over a chair, my laptop closed on the desk. Nothing out of place, nothing unusual. The room was empty, except for me. But that didn't stop the feeling. Even with the lights on, even seeing with my own eyes that I was alone, the dread remained. I ended up turning on all the lights in my room and staying awake until sunrise, unable to shake the conviction that something I couldn't see was there with me. The next morning, I felt ridiculous. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild, maybe triggered by something I'd read online or some half-forgotten nightmare. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Whatever had happened wasn't a product of my imagination. The fear had been too real, too overwhelming. I never mentioned it to anyone. What would I say? That I got scared for no reason, that I felt a presence in my empty room. It sounded crazy even to me. I managed to put it behind me, though the memory of that night still made me uneasy. I'd occasionally get a flash of that same dread when I was alone in my room at night, but never as intense as that first time. Then, last year, the strangest thing of all happened. I woke up in the middle of the night, or at least I thought I was awake. My eyes were open. I could see my room dimly lit by the streetlight outside my window, but I couldn't move. Not a finger, not a toe, nothing. I tried to call out, to scream, but my voice wouldn't work either. I was completely paralyzed. That's when I heard it, the sound of furniture moving, not subtle creaks or shifts, actual movement. My desk chair scraping across the floor, the drawer of my nightstand sliding open and then shut, my closet door swinging on its hinges. I could see it all happening from where I lay, unable to move. Objects in my room were moving on their own, as if someone was walking around touching everything, but there was no one there to touch them. The terror I felt makes that previous experience pale in comparison. I was utterly helpless, unable to move or scream, forced to just lie there and watch as unseen hands rearranged my room. I tried desperately to move, to break free from whatever was holding me down, but it was like my body wasn't mine anymore. It lasted about 30 seconds, though it felt like hours. Then, suddenly, I could move again. I sat bolt upright in bed, gasping for air, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. The room was still. Nothing was moving. I turned on my lamp with shaking hands and looked around. Everything was in its place. The chair was where it should be. The nightstand drawer was closed. The closet door was shut. I later learned about sleep paralysis, and I suppose that's the rational explanation for what happened. My body was asleep while my mind was awake, and my brain conjured hallucinations in that strange in-between state. But that doesn't explain the guitar that played itself years earlier. It doesn't explain the presence I felt watching me, and it doesn't explain why. Since that night, I sometimes wake up to find small objects in my room, not quite where I left them. A book moved from the desk to the shelf, a pair of shoes arranged differently than how I kicked them off. I don't talk about these experiences much. People either think you're making it up or they try to explain it away with logic that never quite fits. But I know what I experienced. I know what I heard, what I felt, what I saw. Sometimes I wonder if returning that guitar was enough, if whatever was attached to it somehow stayed behind, or if it was just the beginning of something I still don't understand. All I know is that now, 5 years later, I still sleep with a light on. And sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I find myself listening for the sound of guitar strings being strummed by invisible fingers. Story 16. I've never been the type to believe in paranormal stuff. I'm pretty grounded, logical, and the first to roll my eyes at ghost stories. That changed last Thursday night, and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened. I haven't slept properly since, and I feel like I need to get this off my chest, even if just to convince myself I'm not losing my mind. It was around 9:30 in the evening. I'd had a long day at work, the kind where your brain feels like mush by the end of it. I work in IT support, and we'd been dealing with a system-wide crash that had everyone panicking. By the time I got home to my apartment in Ridgewood, I was completely drained. I didn't even bother making dinner. I just grabbed some leftover pizza from the fridge, cracked open a beer, and plopped down on my couch to watch some King of the Hill. It's my go-to comfort show when I'm stressed. Something about Hank Hill's monotone voice and mundane problems is oddly soothing after dealing with people screaming about their computers all day. I remember it was the episode where Bobby joins the track team. I was laughing at something Boomhauer said, the pizza half eaten on the coffee table, when my eyelids started getting heavy. I didn't even realize I was falling asleep. One minute I was watching, the next my eyes were closing. Here's where things get weird. I thought I was still awake. I could still hear the TV, could still see the bluish light flickering on my living room wall. But I realized I couldn't move at all. I was lying on my stomach on the couch, face half buried in the cushion, and I couldn't even lift a finger. At first, I thought maybe my arm had fallen asleep from lying on it wrong. But then I realized it wasn't just my arm. It was my entire body. I couldn't move my legs, my other arm, nothing. The only thing I could control were my eyes. I could blink, I could look around, but that was it. And there was this pressure. Like something incredibly heavy was sitting on my back, pushing me down into the couch. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was uncomfortable and terrifying. The weight felt deliberate, like it was intentionally holding me down. I tried to call out, to make any sound at all, but my mouth wouldn't work. My vocal cords felt frozen. The TV was still playing. I could hear Hank saying something about propane, but the sound seemed slightly warped, like it was coming through water or something. As I lay there, completely immobilized, my vision started to change. The edges began darkening like someone was slowly dimming the lights. The center of my field of view was still clear, but everything peripheral was getting blurry and dark. Then I felt it. Something was touching me, poking me actually in my lower back. At first it was gentle, almost curious, like a finger lightly prodding. Then it became more insistent. Poke, 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 right in the same spot, over and over. Pure panic washed over me. Someone, or something, was in my apartment touching me, and I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. I've never felt so vulnerable and terrified in my life. The logical part of my brain was desperately trying to wake up, because on some level I knew this had to be sleep paralysis. I'd read about it before but never experienced it. I kept mentally screaming at myself, move, wake up, turn over, move something. I focused every ounce of my willpower on my left arm. Just move one finger, that's all I need. Just one small movement to break whatever this is. I was mentally straining so hard I felt like my brain might burst, and then, finally, my arm moved. It wasn't graceful. It was more like a spasm, a sudden jerking motion. I managed to twist my body at the same time, flopping over from my stomach onto my back. That's when I saw it. For a brief moment, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, I saw something standing beside my couch. It's hard to describe, and this is going to sound crazy, but it was like vibrations, a large, dark mass of vibrations. Kind of like when you see heat waves rising from hot pavement, but darker and more defined in shape. It reminded me of those invisibility effects in movies. You know, where you can kind of see the outline of something because it distorts what's behind it, like that cloak in Harry Potter, but much darker and more dense. It was roughly human-shaped, tall, maybe 6.5 feet, but without clear features, just this dark, vibrating silhouette standing over me. The weirdest part was that it seemed to notice that I could see it. There was this moment of recognition, awareness, like we both suddenly realized we could perceive each other. And then it moved, fast. It didn't walk or run. It just shot out of the room, through my hallway toward my bedroom. Not floating exactly, but moving in a way that didn't seem natural, too smooth, too quick. That's when I fully woke up, gasping for air like I'd been underwater. I sat bolt upright on the couch, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was sweating through my t-shirt despite the air conditioning being on. The TV was still playing King of the Hill, the exact same episode, just a bit further along. My water bottle was exactly where I'd left it on the coffee table, cap off. The half-eaten pizza was still there, getting cold. Everything was exactly as it had been before I fell asleep, which somehow made it more terrifying. The sleep paralysis had recreated my reality with perfect accuracy. I sat there for a minute, trying to calm down, telling myself it was just a hypnagogic hallucination, sleep paralysis. Whatever scientific explanation makes the most sense. But then something made me freeze again. My bedroom door was open. I always keep it closed because my air conditioning doesn't distribute well otherwise, always, without exception. I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the hallway. I could see through the open door that my bedroom light was off. I distinctly remembered leaving it on that morning. I'd been in a rush and forgot to turn it off. I always beat myself up about wasting electricity. I should have just left, gone to a friend's place, a hotel, anywhere else. But some stubborn part of me needed to check, to confirm that there was nothing there, that it had just been a dream. I flipped on the hallway light and cautiously approached my bedroom. With trembling fingers, I reached around the doorframe and turned on the light switch. The room looked normal. Bed unmade, clothes on the floor, laptop on the desk where I'd left it. I exhaled in relief, feeling stupid for being so scared. Then I noticed my closet door was open too, just a crack, maybe an inch or two. Another thing I always keep shut because the sliding door makes noise otherwise. I stood in the doorway, staring at that small gap in the closet door, unable to make myself walk further into the room. That's when I noticed the silence. My apartment is never completely quiet. There's always the hum of the refrigerator, traffic outside, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, but in that moment, it was dead silent. I backed out of the room, went straight to my front door, put on my shoes, and left. I spent the night at a 24-hour diner, drinking coffee and trying to convince myself I was overreacting. It's been 4 days now. I've been sleeping on a friend's couch, making excuses about a plumbing issue in my apartment. I've gone back during daylight hours to get clothes and stuff for work, but I can't make myself stay there after dark. I know how this sounds. Trust me, I know. Sleep paralysis is a documented phenomenon. The hallucinations, the feeling of pressure, the terror, all explainable by science. But the perfect recreation of my room, the open doors, that vibrating dark figure that seemed so aware of me. I'm not saying it was a ghost or a demon or whatever. I'm just saying I don't know what it was, and I'm not eager to find out. I'm looking for a new apartment now. Maybe it's an overreaction, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever I saw that night is still there, waiting for me to fall asleep again. Story 17. I still can't fully explain what happened that weekend at the old Mitchell farmhouse, and it's been over 6 months now. I've gone over it countless times in my head, tried to rationalize it, but I keep coming back to the same conclusion. We weren't alone in that house. Antonio's college friend had offered us his family's farmhouse for a long weekend getaway. It was this gorgeous old place from the 1800s, sitting on about 20 acres of land in rural Vermont, the kind of place with character. Creaky floorboards, slightly uneven door frames, and that distinct smell that old houses have. Not musty exactly, but like history. We arrived on Friday afternoon with our 2-year-old son, Marco. The drive had been longer than expected because we hit traffic leaving Boston, so Marco was cranky and overtired by the time we pulled up the gravel driveway. Antonio carried our bags while I took Marco, who was half asleep on my shoulder, drooling slightly onto my sweater. The moment I stepped through the front door, I felt it. Not fear or dread or anything sinister, just a distinct awareness that the space was occupied, not physically, but energetically, like walking into a room where a conversation has just ended. I've always been sensitive to these things, though I don't usually tell people because they look at you like you're crazy. Even Antonio doesn't fully understand it, though he humors me. "What do you think?" Antonio asked, dropping the bags in the entryway. "It's beautiful," I said, and it was. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, antique furniture that had probably been there for generations. But I couldn't shake that feeling of being welcomed, almost as if the house itself was acknowledging our arrival. We settled in for the evening, getting Marco fed and putting him down in the portable crib we'd set up in the small bedroom adjacent to ours. Antonio's other friends were arriving the next day, and we were looking forward to a weekend of hiking, good food, and catching up. That first night passed uneventfully. The next morning, Antonio's friends arrived, 2 couples we'd known since college. We spent the day exploring the property, walking through the apple orchard behind the house and letting Marco toddle around in the grass. By evening, everyone was talking about trying this restaurant in town that was supposedly amazing, about 20 minutes away. "You guys should go," I said when they brought it up. "Marco's already had his dinner and he'll be going down soon. I don't mind staying behind." Antonio looked concerned. "You sure? We could order takeout instead." "No, go have fun. Marco's been off his schedule with the travel anyway. He'll probably be out like a light, and I could use some quiet time with my book." After some back and forth, they decided to go. Antonio kissed me goodbye, promising they wouldn't be late, and then the house was quiet except for Marco's babbling through the baby monitor as he played with his stuffed animals in his crib. I settled onto the couch in the living room with my book and a glass of wine. The farmhouse creaked and settled around me. Outside, the wind had picked up, making the old windows rattle slightly. It was cozy, though, with the lamp casting a warm glow and the knowledge that Marco was safely drifting off to sleep upstairs. Around 8:30, I heard Marco sneeze through the monitor, a tiny achoo that made me smile. And then, clear as day, I heard someone say, "Bless you." The voice was gentle, female, and unmistakable through the monitor's speaker. My whole body went cold. I sat frozen, my book forgotten in my lap, straining to hear more. There was nothing, just Marco's soft breathing. I stood up slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. I needed to check on Marco. What if someone had broken in? But the rational part of my brain knew that was unlikely. We were in the middle of nowhere. The doors were locked, and I hadn't heard anyone enter. And strangely, I wasn't feeling fear exactly, more like shock and confusion. I crept up the stairs, avoiding the steps I'd learned would creak. The hallway was dark, except for the nightlight glowing from Marco's room. I paused outside his door, listening. Nothing but the sound of his gentle breathing. Slowly, I pushed the door open. Marco was fine. He was sleeping peacefully on his back, one arm flung above his head in that boneless way toddlers sleep. His stuffed giraffe was tucked beside him. I scanned the room. The window was closed and locked. There was no place for anyone to hide, and everything seemed normal. I stood there for several minutes, watching him sleep, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Maybe I'd imagined it, or perhaps it was interference on the monitor, but it had been so clear, so distinct. I checked the monitor, but it was just a basic audio model, nothing fancy enough to pick up random signals. I went back downstairs, but I couldn't focus on my book anymore. I kept the monitor close, volume turned up, but there were no more voices, just the occasional sound of Marco shifting in his sleep. When Antonio and the others returned around 11, I was still on edge. They were laughing and in good spirits from their night out. I thought about telling Antonio what I'd heard, but I didn't want to put a damper on everyone's mood or sound crazy. Besides, Marco was fine, and whatever or whoever had spoken hadn't seemed threatening. "Everything okay?" Antonio asked as we got ready for bed. "You seem quiet." "Just tired," I said. "How was dinner?" And so we went to bed, me still unsettled but trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Throughout the night, I woke up several times, listening for any unusual sounds, but the house was quiet except for Antonio's soft snoring and the occasional creak of the old structure. Morning came, and I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Antonio got up first and went to check on Marco while I stayed in bed, enjoying a few extra minutes of rest. Then I heard him call my name, his voice carrying a note of confusion that had me sitting up immediately. "Sarah, can you come here?" I hurried to Marco's room and stopped in the doorway, stunned by what I saw. Marco was still asleep, but scattered all around him in his crib were books. Not just one or two, but at least 20 books of different sizes. Some were open, pages splayed out. Others were closed and stacked. There were picture books, a few hardcover novels, even what looked like an old photo album. "Did you put these in here last night?" Antonio asked, his voice hushed to avoid waking Marco. I shook my head slowly, taking in the scene. No, I haven't touched any books except the one I was reading downstairs. We looked at each other, then back at the bizarre scene in the crib. The books must have come from the bookshelf across the room, but that was at least 10 feet away from the crib. Even if Marco had somehow climbed out, gathered books, and gotten back in, which was impossible, he wasn't tall enough to climb out, and the crib sides were too high. He couldn't have done it without making noise, and some of these books were heavy. There's no way his little hands could have carried them without dropping them. "This doesn't make sense," Antonio whispered, looking around the room as if searching for an explanation. Marco stirred then, yawning and blinking up at us with his big brown eyes, seemingly unbothered by his literary sleeping companions. He smiled and reached for one of the picture books, babbling happily as if this was completely normal. I helped Marco out of the crib while Antonio started removing the books, examining each one as if it might provide some clue. Most were children's books, but there were also a few novels and that old photo album which turned out to contain black and white photos of the farmhouse and what I assumed were previous owners. Maybe one of the others came in during the night, Antonio suggested, though his tone made it clear he didn't really believe this. And what decided to fill Marco's crib with books without waking him, without us hearing? I shook my head. Besides, they were all pretty tipsy when you got back. I doubt any of them would have been that coordinated. As we got Marco dressed and ready for breakfast, I could see Antonio was disturbed by the incident. He kept glancing around the room, checking the window again, even though it was still locked from the inside. We went downstairs where our friends were already making coffee and breakfast, talking about plans for the day. I wondered if I should mention what had happened, but Antonio caught my eye and gave a slight shake of his head. I understood. No need to freak everyone out, especially since we couldn't explain it. As we packed up to leave later that morning, Antonio was rushing, eager to get on the road. He'd been on edge all morning, making excuses about needing to get back for work prep the next day. Our friends had already left, saying their goodbyes with promises to get together again soon. I was in Marco's room, folding his portable crib, when Antonio appeared in the doorway. "Almost ready?" he asked, jingling the car keys in his hand. I nodded, but then paused. "Antonio, did you feel anything strange about this house?" He hesitated, then stepped into the room, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "What do you mean?" "Last night, when you were all at dinner," I took a deep breath. "I heard Marco sneeze through the baby monitor, and then I heard a voice say, 'Bless you.'" Antonio's eyes widened. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I came up to check and he was fine, sleeping peacefully. There was no one here, and I didn't want to sound crazy." I shrugged. "But after the books this morning, you think the house is haunted?" He wasn't mocking me, which I appreciated, but I could see the skepticism in his expression. "I don't know about haunted, but from the moment we arrived, I felt like there was someone here. Not in a scary way, more like," I struggled to find the words, "like a presence that was aware of us, that was watching over us, maybe." Antonio was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Well, whatever it was, I'm glad we're leaving. That book thing was just too weird." But as we drove away, Marco babbling happily in his car seat, I couldn't help but look back at the old farmhouse with a strange sense of wonder. Whatever or whoever had been there had watched over my son, had blessed him when he sneezed, had perhaps even tried to entertain him with books during the night. It wasn't threatening or malevolent. It had been protective, caring even. I never told Antonio, but part of me was sad to leave. I'd felt a connection to that presence, a sense that it had welcomed us into its home and watched over my child. And though I can't explain what happened that night, how those books appeared in Marco's crib without anyone hearing, how that voice came through the monitor, I find myself oddly comforted by the memory. Some might find it terrifying, the thought of an unseen presence in a house with their child. But in that old Vermont farmhouse, I think we encountered something gentle, something that just wanted to be acknowledged and remembered. And on nights when I check on Marco sleeping in his bed at home, I sometimes whisper a quiet thank you to whatever was watching over him that night. Story 18. I still can't believe it's been 5 years since that night. I've tried therapy, medication, even moving to a different city, but nothing helps. I'm writing this down now because I need someone, anyone, to know what happened to us. Maybe someone out there has experienced something similar and can help. I was 21 when I started working as a Level 3 security officer at Metropolitan Medical Center in San Antonio. The job paid well for someone my age, Xavier Ramirez, just trying to save up for college while figuring life out. The hospital was massive, with a newer section built in 2010 that connected to the original building from the 1950s. The old section had been abandoned for almost a decade when I started working there. Most security personnel avoided the abandoned wing. There were rumors about strange noises, equipment turning on by itself, and shadows moving where they shouldn't. I dismissed it all as typical ghost stories people tell about old buildings. I was wrong. So fucking wrong. My team consisted of 4 people. There was Agent Yates, a former Secret Service agent in his late 40s who'd seen some serious shit in his day but never talked about it. Then there were Marcus and Derek, both ex-Marines who'd served together in Afghanistan. Marcus was this huge guy, 6'4" and built like a linebacker, with this booming laugh that echoed through the halls. Derek was quieter, more reserved, always watching and analyzing everything. And then there was me, the rookie. It started on a Tuesday night in October. The hospital was short-staffed and management wanted us to check the old wing for possible homeless people seeking shelter as temperatures were dropping. Yates suggested we do a complete sweep since none of us had ever fully explored the abandoned section. "Could be fun," Marcus said with that big smile of his. "Like urban exploration, but we're getting paid for it." We gathered our equipment, flashlights, radios, batons, and headed toward the connecting corridor between the 2 buildings. The heavy fire doors groaned as we pushed them open, revealing a dimly lit hallway with peeling paint and the musty smell of abandonment. The first hour was uneventful. We found old patient rooms with beds still made, waiting rooms with magazines from 2007, and nurses' stations with ancient computer monitors. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust that swirled around our flashlight beams. The place felt frozen in time, like everyone had just vanished mid-shift. "This place gives me the creeps," I remember saying as we passed a room with children's drawings still taped to the walls. "It's just an empty building, kid," Yates replied, but I noticed how his hand kept drifting to his sidearm. We reached the old ICU around midnight. The layout was weird. 3 parallel hallways connected by smaller corridors, creating a grid pattern. The patient rooms lined the outer hallways, while the middle corridor housed equipment storage and the nurses' station. It was disorienting, like a maze. "Let's split up," Yates suggested. "Marcus and I will take the right hallway. Xavier and Derek take the left. Radio check every 5 minutes." That's when everything changed. Derek and I moved slowly down the left corridor, checking each room. Our flashlights created strange dancing shadows on the walls. The floor was sticky in places and ceiling tiles had collapsed, leaving debris scattered everywhere. We were about halfway down when I noticed Derek had stopped moving. He was standing completely still, staring at a doorway about 20 feet ahead of us. "Derek," I whispered, but he didn't respond. I followed his gaze to the doorway. At first I didn't see anything, just darkness beyond an open door. Then I felt it, this overwhelming sense of wrongness that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn. The air suddenly felt thick and heavy, difficult to breathe. Then came the smell, like rotting meat left in the sun for days, so powerful I had to fight not to gag. My flashlight beam wavered as my hand started shaking. That's when I saw it. Looking from the top of the doorway was something. I still struggle to describe it accurately. It wasn't fully visible, more like a distortion in the air that somehow had mass and form. Where its eyes should have been were just voids, empty spaces that seemed to pull at you, like they wanted to suck you in. Its mouth, if you could call it that, was stretched impossibly wide in what looked like a silent scream. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't even breathe. It was like my entire body had forgotten how to function. Derek finally broke the silence with a sound I'll never forget. Not quite a scream, more like the whimper of a wounded animal. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers clumsy with fear. "Yates," he gasped. "Marcus, something's here. Something's fucking here." I don't remember who moved first. I think it was Marcus, who came running from the other hallway, his heavy footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. He reached us, took one look at where we were staring, and his face went completely white. "Run," he said, his voice barely audible, then louder. "Run!" We didn't need to be told twice. Marcus took off first, with Derek right behind him. I started to follow, but some stupid impulse made me look back. It was floating toward us. Not walking, floating. Its limbs, too long, too thin, hung motionless at its sides as it glided forward, leaving ripples in the air like heat waves off hot asphalt. The void eyes seemed to fix directly on me, and I felt something cold touch my mind. I don't remember much after that. Fragments come back to me sometimes, running through corridors that seem to stretch endlessly, doors slamming behind us, Yates shouting into his radio for backup that never came. I remember the emergency exit door feeling impossibly heavy as we pushed through it, and the cold night air hitting my lungs like a physical blow. I came to in the parking lot, sitting on the curb with my head between my knees. Yates was on the phone, his voice low and intense. Marcus was pacing, chain-smoking cigarettes with shaking hands. Derek just sat there staring at the building with vacant eyes. We agreed to never speak about what we saw. What could we say? That we encountered some kind of supernatural entity in an abandoned hospital wing. We'd lose our jobs, or worse, end up in psychiatric evaluation. So we made up a story about a homeless man who threatened us with a knife, filed our report, and tried to go back to normal, but normal never came back. 3 months later, the hospital finally demolished the old wing. I remember feeling relieved, thinking maybe whatever was in there would be destroyed along with the building. I was wrong about that too. 3 weeks after the demolition, Yates killed himself, shot himself in his car outside his ex-wife's house. The note he left simply said, "It won't leave me alone." A few days after Yates's funeral, Marcus died. Official cause of death was a heart attack, but I spoke to his girlfriend afterward. She told me he'd been having terrible nightmares, waking up screaming about something watching him from the corners of the room. The night before he died, he called her in a panic, saying he could smell rotting meat in his apartment even though there was nothing there. That left Derek and me. We started meeting regularly, trying to make sense of what was happening. Derek was convinced the entity had somehow attached itself to us, following us out of the hospital. He became obsessed with researching similar encounters, filling notebooks with theories and potential protections. I started seeing it too, always in my peripheral vision, a distortion in the air, gone when I turned to look directly at it. Sometimes I'd wake up at night with that putrid smell filling my nostrils, feeling like something was hovering just above my bed. Derek found a priest who specialized in what he called spiritual attachments. Father Morales performed a kind of exorcism on both of us. For a while, it seemed to work. The sighting stopped, the smell disappeared, and I started sleeping through the night again, but it didn't last. 2 months after the ritual, Derek called me at 3 in the morning, sobbing uncontrollably. He said it was back, stronger than before, and it was angry. I rushed to his apartment, but by the time I arrived, Derek was catatonic, just sitting on his couch, staring at the wall, occasionally murmuring, "It's right there, don't you see it?" Over and over, I got him admitted to a psychiatric facility, but he never really recovered. He's still there, 5 years later, heavily medicated and barely responsive. I visit him every Sunday, but I don't think he recognizes me anymore. As for me, it seems to have shifted its focus to Derek, leaving me mostly alone, but I still feel it watching sometimes. Still catch glimpses of it in reflections or shadows. Still wake up some nights with that smell burning my nostrils. I've tried everything, moved to a different city, changed my name, even spent time in a monastery trying to find peace. Nothing works. It's always there, just at the edge of my awareness. I'm writing this as a warning. Some places should stay abandoned. Some doors should remain closed. And if you ever find yourself face to face with something that shouldn't exist, don't look into its eyes. Don't look back when you run. Just get as far away as you can, as fast as you can, because sometimes the things that follow you home never leave. I still don't know what it wants or why it chose us. All I know is that 3 of the 4 people who saw it that night are gone, or as good as gone. I'm the only one left, and I live every day wondering if today will be the day it finally comes for me too. Story 19. I still get goosebumps thinking about what happened to me as a kid. I've been debating whether to share this for years, but I finally need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can help me make sense of it all. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a tiny rural town where everyone knows everyone. My mom moved us there when I was just a baby to be closer to my great-grandmother who was getting sick. Before that, my mom had bounced around a lot, different apartments, different towns, but Oak Ridge was supposed to be our permanent home, somewhere stable. The house wasn't anything special, just a 2-story farmhouse with faded blue paint and creaky floorboards. But it had a big yard where I could play, and rent was cheap. I never felt anything weird about it until I was about 4 or 5 years old. It was a Saturday afternoon in autumn. I remember because the leaves were changing, and my mom had been raking the yard earlier. I had taken a nap after lunch, something I hated doing but my mom insisted on. When I woke up, the house was dead quiet, that strange, heavy silence that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Mom's bedroom door was cracked open, and I could see her fast asleep on her bed, probably exhausted from yard work. I decided to get some juice from the kitchen, so I headed down the hallway. That's when it happened. I was about halfway to the kitchen when I caught some movement from the corner of my eye, not like a shadow or something small. This was substantial movement. I turned my head toward the living room wall, and what I saw made my entire body go cold. A woman was coming through the wall, not walking through a doorway, literally emerging from the solid wall. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or my eyes playing tricks after my nap, but as I stood there, completely frozen, more and more of her appeared. She was tall, really tall. I was a short kid, but even by adult standards, she must have been 6 or 7 feet. She wasn't transparent like ghosts in cartoons, but she wasn't fully solid either. The best way I can describe it is that she looked faded, like an old photograph that's been left in the sun too long. But I could clearly see details. Her skin was pale, almost porcelain white. She had long brunette hair that hung down past her shoulders, and she wore this flowing white dress that seemed to move slightly, even though there wasn't any breeze. The strangest part was what looked like a crown or some kind of circular headpiece around her hair. Not like a princess crown with points, but a white band that wrapped around her head. It seemed to glow slightly brighter than the rest of her. What terrified me most were her eyes. They locked onto me immediately, and I felt like she was staring straight through me. Her face had no expression, not angry, not sad, just intense. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just stood there, my juice forgotten, as this woman stared at me. For what felt like forever, but was probably just a minute, we stayed like that, me frozen in the hallway, her half emerged from the wall. Then, slowly, she began moving toward me. She didn't walk exactly. It was more like she glided across the floor. No footsteps, no sound at all. When she reached me, she knelt down, bringing her face level with mine. She was so close I should have felt her breath, but there was nothing, just a slight coldness in the air around her. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and they bored into mine with such intensity that I felt like my mind was being invaded. That's the last thing I remember before everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the living room couch with my mom, aunt, and uncle all standing over me, looking worried sick. Mom was crying, my aunt was on the phone with what I later learned was 911, and my uncle was holding my hand, repeatedly saying my name. According to them, my mom had woken up from her nap and found me collapsed in the hallway. I wouldn't wake up no matter what they tried. They'd called my aunt and uncle who lived nearby and they rushed over. I had been unconscious for almost 3 hours. The paramedics came and checked me out. They couldn't find anything physically wrong with me. No fever, normal vital signs. They suggested taking me to the hospital for tests, but by then I seemed fine, just confused and tired. Mom decided to watch me carefully at home instead. I never told any of them what I saw. At that age, I didn't have the words to explain it, and I was terrified they wouldn't believe me or would think something was wrong with me. So I kept quiet, and eventually, everyone chalked it up to me fainting from low blood sugar or something similar. But I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't stop thinking about her, the woman from the wall. For months afterward, I was terrified of that hallway. I'd run past it at full speed, never looking toward the living room wall. I started sleeping with my bedroom door closed and a nightlight on. My mom noticed my behavior change, but probably thought it was just a phase. Life went on, and as the years passed, the memory of the woman faded slightly, though it never completely left me. By the time I was 8 or 9, I had convinced myself it had been a weird dream or hallucination, something my young mind had made up. Then it happened again, but completely differently. I was about 8 years old, and it was a school night. Mom and I were watching some TV show in the living room when a commercial came on. I needed to use the bathroom upstairs, so I headed up alone. Our upstairs hallway was narrow, with my bedroom at one end, the bathroom in the middle, and my mom's room at the other end. As I walked past my mom's open bedroom door, something caught my eye. I stopped and looked in, and that's when I saw it. A dog, not just any dog, but a Jack Russell Terrier, walking alongside my mom's bed. We didn't have a dog. We'd never had a dog. Mom was allergic. This dog wasn't normal. Like the woman years before, it had that same faded quality. Visible but not quite solid. I could see the pattern of the bedspread through its body, but only faintly. The dog was mostly white with brown patches, and it moved with purpose, like it was patrolling the room. The strange thing was, I wasn't scared this time. Surprised, yes. Confused, definitely. But not terrified like I'd been with the woman. Maybe I was older, or maybe the dog just didn't seem threatening. Whatever the reason, I stood in the doorway, watching. The dog must have sensed me because it stopped walking and turned to look at me. Its eyes were alert and intelligent, far more aware than any normal dog's eyes should be. It stared at me, and I stared back. Neither of us moved. This standoff lasted what felt like 5 minutes, though it was probably less. Then, as casually as it had appeared, the dog turned away from me, walked to the wall beside my mom's closet, and simply disappeared into it. Not through a door or opening. It walked straight through solid wall and was gone. I stood there for a long time trying to process what I'd seen. Unlike the first time, I didn't faint or feel scared. I just felt curious and weirdly calm. I used the bathroom and went back downstairs, never mentioning what I'd seen to my mom. Years passed. I grew up, graduated high school, and eventually moved out to go to college. The memories of both encounters stayed with me, filed away in that part of my brain reserved for unexplainable experiences. I still visited Mom regularly at the old house, but I never saw anything unusual again. Then, during one visit when I was in my early 20s, Mom and I were reminiscing about the house and the years we'd spent there. Out of nowhere, she mentioned, "You know, before we moved in, an elderly woman lived here for decades. She was in her 80s when she passed away." My ears perked up immediately. "Did she live alone?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "No," Mom replied. "She had a little Jack Russell Terrier that went everywhere with her. The neighbors told me they were inseparable. I think the dog died just a few months before she did. Poor thing probably couldn't bear being without her." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had never told my mother about either of my experiences, yet here she was, unknowingly confirming what I'd seen. I wanted to tell her then, but something held me back. Instead, I asked if she knew anything else about the woman. "Not much," Mom said, though Mrs. Jenkins next door once showed me an old photo of her from when she was young. Apparently, she had been quite beautiful, tall and elegant. The photo was from some May Day celebration in the 1930s. She was wearing a white dress and had this flower crown in her hair. She was chosen as the May Queen that year. A flower crown, a white dress, tall and elegant. I excused myself shortly after, claiming I needed some air. Standing in our backyard, looking back at the house, everything suddenly made sense. The woman I'd seen wasn't some random ghost or hallucination. She was the previous owner in her youth, appearing as she had in her proudest moment. And the dog was her faithful companion, still patrolling the bedroom, still protecting its home. I've researched paranormal phenomena extensively since then, trying to understand what happened to me. Why did the woman cause me to lose consciousness while the dog just calmly observed me? Why did they appear to me and not to my mother? Why those specific moments in time? I don't have answers. I've never experienced anything like it again, even when visiting my mother at the old house. Sometimes I wonder if they showed themselves to me because children are more receptive to the paranormal, or if they were simply trying to let me know I wasn't alone in that house. Whatever the reason, I know what I saw. Two spirits, bound to a place they loved, somehow crossing over into my world for just a few moments. And though it terrified me as a child, I find it strangely comforting now. The idea that love and connection can be so strong they transcend even death itself. Story 20. I've never been one to believe in ghosts. I mean, sure, I'd watch those paranormal investigation shows and get a little spooked, but I always chalked it up to overactive imaginations or clever editing. That changed last October when I visited Antietam. My buddy Jake and I had planned this little Civil War battlefield tour through Maryland and Virginia. We're both history buffs, not hardcore reenactors or anything, just guys who appreciate learning about the past. Jake's more into the tactical aspects, while I'm fascinated by the human stories. Antietam was our first major stop. We booked 2 nights at this quaint bed and breakfast called Magnolia House, about half a mile from the battlefield itself. It was this beautiful old 2-story white house with a wraparound porch and rocking chairs overlooking the fields, the kind of place that looks like it belongs on a postcard. The owner, Martha, was this sweet older lady who greeted us with fresh lemonade when we checked in around 4 in the afternoon. "You boys are in rooms 3 and 4 upstairs, each with its own little porch section where you can watch the sunset over the battlefield," she said, handing us these old-fashioned brass keys. "Breakfast is at 8 sharp." We spent that afternoon exploring the visitor center and walking some of the trails around the battlefield. It was sobering to stand where thousands of men had died in a single day, still the bloodiest day in American history. By evening, we were both mentally exhausted from trying to process the scale of what had happened there. After grabbing dinner at a local pub, we headed back to the B&B around 8:30. It was a cool October night, perfect for sitting outside with a beer and just unwinding. Jake said he needed to make some calls, so I went out to my little porch section alone. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting this orange-pink glow across the fields. It was peaceful, almost eerily so. I remember checking my phone at exactly 9 o'clock because my mom had texted asking if we'd arrived safely. Right after I replied, something changed. It wasn't anything I could see or hear, just this sudden overwhelming feeling of dread that washed over me. My skin prickled and I felt like someone was watching me from somewhere in the darkness beyond the porch. I tried to shake it off. "You're just spooked because of all the battlefield stories," I told myself, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like when you walk into a room where people have been arguing, that lingering tension in the air, but 100 times stronger. Around 9:30, I noticed something strange in the field below. There was this faint light, kind of dancing around. At first, I thought it might be a car's headlights from the road beyond, but it was too dim and didn't move like headlights would. It wavered and bobbed like someone carrying an old lantern, but there was no one there that I could see. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes, trying to figure out what I was looking at. It seemed to follow a pattern, moving along what I assumed was one of the walking paths through the field. Then it would stop, hover for a bit, and continue on. I texted Jake, "You gotta see this weird light in the field." He replied immediately, "On my way." Jake came out to my porch a minute later, and I pointed toward where I'd seen the light. "Right there. See it? What do you think that is?" He squinted into the darkness. Wait, yeah, I see it now. That's weird. "Let's go to your porch," I suggested. "You might have a better angle." Jake's porch was just around the corner from mine, and it did offer a clearer view of the field where the light was moving. We stood there watching in silence for a few minutes. The light would fade sometimes, almost disappearing, then grow stronger again. "Could be kids with flashlights," Jake offered, but he didn't sound convinced. "In a closed national park after dark," I responded. As we were watching the light, I glanced slightly to the left, toward where the field met a line of trees at the property's edge. That's when I saw it. A figure, completely black, rose up from the ground like smoke solidifying. There was no mistaking it for a person. It was humanoid in shape, but had no features I could make out. Just this mass of absolute darkness that somehow seemed darker than the night surrounding it. It moved unnaturally fast, darting in front of a tree about 50 yards away, then seemed to dissolve back into the ground. The whole sighting lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it's burned into my memory forever. I grabbed Jake's arm so hard he yelped. "What the hell, man?" he said, pulling away. "Did you see that?" My voice was barely a whisper. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "See what?" I pointed toward the tree line. "That figure." It was like a shadow, but it moved. It wasn't attached to anything. Jake stared out into the darkness. I didn't see anything except that light, which is gone now too. I was covered in goosebumps. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and I felt cold despite the mild night. It wasn't just fear, it was this bone-deep certainty that whatever I'd seen wasn't natural. "I swear to God, Jake, something was there." He looked at me closely. "You're really freaked out." "Let's go inside," I said. I couldn't stand being out there another minute. Back in the B&B's common area, Jake grabbed us both a glass of water from the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly spilled mine. "You want to talk about what you think you saw?" Jake asked carefully. "I know what I saw," I insisted. "It wasn't a person or an animal. It was like a shadow that had pulled itself out of the ground, and the way it moved wasn't right, too fast, too fluid." Jake didn't say anything for a long moment. "You know, my grandfather used to talk about shadow people. He claimed he saw them in Vietnam, said they showed up before bad things happened." "Great. That's comforting," I muttered. "I'm just saying, there are lots of stories about this kind of thing, especially in places where there's been violence or death, and Antietam had seen plenty of both. Over 23,000 casualties in a single day of fighting. I'd read accounts earlier at the visitor center of how the cornfields had turned red with blood, how bodies had been stacked like cordwood. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I kept my bedside lamp on and jumped at every creak and groan of the old house. Around 3 in the morning, I could have sworn I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room, heavy boots on wooden floors, but when I finally worked up the courage to peek out, there was nothing there. At breakfast the next morning, I must have looked like hell. Martha noticed immediately. "Rough night, dear?" she asked as she poured coffee. "Just had trouble sleeping," I replied, not wanting to sound crazy. Martha gave me a knowing look. "The house does settle something awful at night. All these old places do." I hesitated, then decided to take a chance. "Do you ever get guests who see things around the property?" She paused in arranging muffins on a plate. "What sort of things might you be referring to?" I don't know. Lights in the field, or... I lowered my voice, though Jake was the only other person in the dining room engrossed in his phone. Figures, shadow figures. Martha's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. She sat down across from me. "Where exactly did you see this figure?" she asked quietly. "Where the field meets the woods, at the edge of the property." She nodded slowly. "You're not the first, Mr. Reynolds. Not by a long shot." My stomach dropped. "So other guests have seen it too." "That exact spot has a history," she confirmed. "A captain in the Union Army was killed there, shot by his own men in the confusion. At least, that's one story. Others say it was the site of a field hospital where hundreds died. The records from that day are chaotic at best, and people see, what exactly? Shadow figures, as you called them. Lights that some say are lanterns carried by spirits still searching for their comrades. Cold spots. Whispers." She leaned back. "I don't advertise it. Bad for business, you understand. But this whole area carries heavy energy. 23,000 men didn't just die here. They died violently, suddenly, often without anyone to comfort them in their final moments." Jake had put his phone down and was listening now. "You believe in this stuff, Martha?" he asked. She gave him a small smile. "What I believe doesn't matter, but I've owned this place for 27 years, and I've heard too many similar stories from people who had no reason to make them up. People like your friend here, who clearly saw something that disturbed him deeply." I nodded, grateful for her validation. The feeling was the worst part. Before I even saw anything, there was this dread, like something horrible was about to happen. "The land remembers," Martha said simply, "especially land that's soaked in that much blood. We left Antietam that day instead of staying the second night. Jake didn't give me any grief about it, which I appreciated." As we drove away, I kept looking in the rearview mirror at the rolling fields behind us, half expecting to see that shadow figure standing in the middle of the road. It's been 8 months, and I still think about what I saw nearly every day. I've researched shadow figures obsessively, read countless accounts from other people who've experienced similar things. Some theories suggest they're interdimensional beings or manifestations of negative energy. Others claim they're souls trapped between worlds. I don't know what they are, but I know what I saw was real, and I know I'll never set foot on Antietam battlefield again, especially not as the sun is setting and the boundary between our world and whatever lies beyond grows thin. Sometimes I wake up at night with that same feeling of dread washing over me, and I wonder if whatever I saw followed me home. I keep the lights on now when I sleep, and sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of something darker than darkness itself. Story 21. I never wanted to share this before because honestly, who'd believe me? I was just a kid when it started, and even now at 25, talking about it makes my hands shake. But after what happened last week, I need to get this out there. We moved to Millfield when I was 6. It was one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods with industrial plants looming in the distance. My dad got a promotion, so we upgraded from our tiny apartment to a 2-story house with a basement. My parents were thrilled. I wasn't. From the literal first night, something felt wrong. Not the normal new house wrong, something deeper. I remember standing in my new bedroom while Mom unpacked my stuff and feeling like someone was watching me from the corner. When I turned to look, nothing was there, but the feeling didn't go away. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, like someone was pressing down on my chest. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it for the first time. A metallic clang from the basement followed by slow footsteps, step, step, thud, step, step, thud. Like someone was walking but dragging something behind them. I ran to my parents' room crying. They checked the house, found nothing, and chalked it up to new house jitters. My little brother Tommy slept through everything, peaceful as could be in his room across the hall. I slept on my parents' bedroom floor that night, and the next, and the next. For over a year, my dad started getting frustrated. "Ethan, you're 7 years old now. Big boys sleep in their own rooms." My mom was more patient, but even she started pushing me to be brave. They didn't understand. They couldn't hear what I heard every night. Eventually, they put their foot down. I had to sleep in my own room. That first night back was when the pattern really established itself. Every night, like clockwork, around 3 a.m., clang, step, step, thud, step, step, thud. The footsteps would come up the basement stairs, stop at the top, and then nothing. Just silence until morning. I tried telling my parents, but they never heard it. Tommy never heard it, just me. Dad suggested I was having bad dreams. Mom wondered if I was sleepwalking. They even took me to a therapist who said I had adjustment anxiety. But I knew what I heard was real. For 5 years, this was my life, every single night. I'd lie awake, waiting for the sounds, then barely sleep after they finished. My grades suffered. I was always tired. The other kids started calling me Zombie Boy because of the dark circles under my eyes. When I turned 11, things got worse, much worse. It started with my stuff going missing. I'd put my backpack on my desk, then find it in the basement the next morning. My favorite hoodie disappeared from my closet and showed up hanging on the basement banister. My phone, my homework, my books, all would vanish and reappear in the basement. Tommy's toys started disappearing too, but they never came back. His favorite action figure, the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was a baby, gone without a trace. He'd cry and Mom would blame me, thinking I was hiding his stuff to get back at him for something. I wasn't. Our pets refused to go into the basement. Our dog Max would stand at the top of the stairs and growl, hackles raised. Our cat Mittens would hiss and run away if you tried to carry her down there. Even my mom started noticing this and saying it was weird, but she figured there must be mice or something. For my 12th birthday, my parents finally let me have a sleepover. 3 friends came over, Jake, Matt, and Lisa from school. We stayed up late playing video games and watching movies. Around midnight, we decided to tell scary stories in the basement. I know, stupid idea, but I was trying to act normal for once. We sat in a circle on the basement floor with just a flashlight. I remember the concrete was ice cold through my sleeping bag. Jake told a story about a hitchhiker ghost. Matt talked about some creepypasta he'd read online. Then Lisa started telling a story about a patient who died in her grandmother's nursing home. He was this really old guy who needed oxygen to breathe, she said, shining the flashlight under her chin. He dragged his oxygen tank everywhere. The nurses said he was super creepy and would stare at people from doorways. As she finished her story, I felt it, a cold rush of air that passed right through me, like someone walking through my body. And then, just barely audible, I heard my name whispered, "Ethan." I jumped up, knocking over the flashlight. My friends laughed, thinking I was just scared of Lisa's story. I played it off, but I knew something had changed. Whatever was in our house had noticed me noticing it. 2 weeks later, I was babysitting Tommy while my parents went to dinner. We were watching TV in the living room when suddenly Tommy yelped in pain. "Ow, why'd you scratch me?" he cried, rubbing his arm. "I didn't touch you," I said. I was sitting on the other side of the couch. Tommy held out his arm. 3 red lines had appeared on his skin, like scratch marks. As we both stared at them, I felt that same cold rush of air pass through me. And then, I'll never forget this sound, a low, quiet laugh. Tommy started crying, and I took him upstairs, away from the basement door. I called my parents, who came home early. They thought Tommy had scratched himself without realizing it. I didn't argue. What could I say? The last 2 nights in that house were the worst of my life. The night before we moved, we were leaving because Dad got transferred again, thank God. I was packing my room when 3 a.m. rolled around. The familiar sounds started. Clang, step, step, thud, step, step, thud. But this time, the footsteps didn't stop at the top of the stairs. They continued into the hallway. Step, step, thud, step, step, thud. Getting closer to my room, I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Along with the footsteps came another sound. Breathing, heavy, labored breathing, like someone struggling to get air. My bedroom door was cracked open. I watched, paralyzed, as it slowly swung wider, and there, in my doorway, I saw it clearly for the first time. It was an old man, tall and sickly thin. He wore dirty striped pajamas that hung off his skeletal frame. An oxygen mask covered the lower half of his face, connected to a metal tank he dragged behind him, the source of that thudding sound I'd heard for years. His skin was grey and papery, and his eyes, God, his eyes were milky white but somehow still focused right on me. But his hands were what terrified me most. His fingers were unnaturally long, almost like claws, and they twitched constantly, like he was eager to grab something, to grab me. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then, without warning, he turned and shuffled away, dragging his tank behind him. Step, step, thud, back to the basement. I didn't sleep at all that night. I couldn't tell my parents. We were leaving tomorrow anyway, and they'd think I was just trying to get out of helping with the move. On our final night, I convinced Tommy to let me sleep in his room. I told him it was because my bed was already packed up. The real reason was I was terrified of being alone. We made a fort with blankets and were actually having fun trying to stay up late. Tommy fell asleep around midnight, but I stayed awake, listening. At 3 a.m., right on schedule. Clang, step, step, thud, step, step, thud. The footsteps came up the stairs into the hallway and stopped outside Tommy's room. I heard the breathing again, that horrible wheezing, but the door didn't open. Then a voice, a deep, raspy voice that started as a whisper and ended in a growl. "Don't leave me!" I screamed until my throat hurt. Tommy woke up crying. My mom came running in and found us both hysterical. I told her everything through my tears, and for once, she didn't dismiss me. She saw how terrified I was, how terrified Tommy was. We spent our last night in Millfield at a hotel. The next day, as we were doing our final walkthrough of the empty house, I overheard the realtor talking to my mom. "Such a shame about the previous owner," she said quietly. "What happened?" my mom asked. "Oh, I thought you knew. An elderly man died in the basement. He had severe emphysema, needed oxygen, lived alone, no family. They only found him because the neighbors complained about the smell." I felt sick. All those years my parents thought I was making it up, and the realtor knew someone had died there all along. We moved 3 states away after that. I started sleeping better. The nightmares faded. I went to college, got a job, even got my own apartment. For 13 years, I thought it was over, until last week. I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. to a familiar sound, that heavy, labored breathing. My room was dark, but I could make out a shape moving toward my door, the glint of metal, the soft thud of something being dragged across my floor. Just as I reached for the light, it disappeared through my doorway. I jumped up and checked my entire apartment. Nothing was there, but on the floor just outside my bedroom was a single mark, like something heavy had been dragged across the carpet. He found me. I don't know how, but he found me. I'm writing this sitting in a 24-hour diner because I can't go back to my apartment. I don't know what to do. I don't know why he's attached to me or what he wants. All I know is that at 3 a.m. tonight, I'll hear it again. Clang, step, step, thud, and this time I have nowhere else to go.